Wolfpack, what is going on? It's your boy, the Wolf of Roto Street. RotoStreetJournal.com, we breed and feed you fantasy wolves. Here with your preseason week 3 takeaways, plus Mike and, of course, the Truth will be joining me in just a little bit to dive into our busts. I cannot wait to dive into that. Tons of huge names, and we'll have to really define what bust means because these people are probably going to be solid picks regardless. We just expect them to underperform where you're getting them. So we will dive into those names, some crazy fringe first round type of guys. We don't want to just be the usual casual podcast here. Some guys we truly think could just not live up to the expectation of their draft slot. So come on in. Let's get about 25 minutes here of preseason week 3 recap. Lots to take away, and really the last kind of look at these teams before we hit the regular season. And then it is on to our bust talk. So let's dive into everything you need to know, who's risen, who's fallen, as we get ready. Only about 2 weeks left. Let's go, Wolfpack. I know it's the heart of the draft season. So come on in. Any questions you have ahead of your drafts, I will make sure to answer them all at the end of the stream. So get them on in. And, of course, the thumbs up button, if you're enjoying what you hear, does truly help us out. Let's get right into, though, our risers and fallers from preseason week 3. Before we dive into week 3, I do need to hit one thing from week 2. So we go live every Monday with these recaps. And last Monday, there was a Monday Night Football game with a lot of important notes that we haven't quite hit yet on this show. So for risers and falls of the preseason, we'll go backwards a week and talk about the Commanders, specifically Sam Howell, looking absolutely phenomenal. Now, we have to note it was against the number 2s for the Ravens. That has to be considered. He still dominated like the number 2s, as he should. 19 of 25, 188 yards, and 2 touchdowns in the first half. 2 quarters of action for Sam Howell, 3 rushes and 17 yards as well. You got to see how pass-happy this offense can and should be under Eric Bieniemy coming over from the Chiefs. You saw how the control has of the system, fully endorsed after the game by Ron Rivera, saying, we haven't had a quarterback like this in a long time that we really feel we can build off of. He now finished Sam Howell the preseason, 28 of 37, 265 yards, and 3 touchdowns, along with 25 rush yards in roughly 3 quarters. That's humongous stats. Really impressive, really encouraging performance for Sam Howell, one of the best QB2 picks you can make with a ton of upside in those late rounds. Moving forward, also, Terry McLaurin does get hurt. He suffers a turf toe injury, and that has his week 1 in question. He does typically tough things out, which honestly, respect it real life-wise. Your team definitely loves you for it, Terry. As a fantasy owner, I hate it. You're not going to be getting him at 100% if he does decide to gut it out. I truly hope they just play it safe, but that's not how he likes to roll, Terry. He's played through injuries in the past, even when it makes him less effective. That makes me nervous for him, but it does have me that much more bullish on Jahan Dotson. He sees 5 straight targets as soon as McLaurin departs, ultimately going for 7 targets, 5 catches, 76 yards, leading the team in catches and yardage in week 2. And that now brings Dotson's total up to 7 catches, 106 yards, and 1 touchdown. I'm a huge Dotson fan. I've loved the kid. I had him all last year, had him in a bunch of dynasty. I think he's an absolute stud who may have just taken over for Terry McLaurin even without the injury. Now that McLaurin's banged up, it might be a shoo-in that Dotson emerges as the true wide receiver 1 here, at least while we got McLaurin recovering and maybe for the rest of the season. So big upgrades for both Howell and Jahan Dotson heading into this season. Moving to the Steelers-Falcons game, once again, Kenny Pickett looks like a man reborn. Goes 4 for 4, leads 2 scoring drives. They've now scored the Steelers on every single drive of Kenny Pickett's touchdowns, not just field goals, touchdowns, on all of his preseason drives. He wraps up his preseason at 13 of 15, over 85% completion rate, 199 yards, 2 touchdowns for Kenny Pickett in roughly a half of action. Looking for just absolutely phenomenal. And we know under Mike Tomlin, it's a very much a pass-first offense typically. Canada continues to promise they're going to be run-heavy, but he's letting his gunslinger rope it all around the field, and he is not disappointing right now. And Kenny Pickett throws 2 30-plus yard catches to George Pickens, to Deontay Johnson, some really, really nice bombs, great routes from both guys as well. You just love to see it. Every ship rises when the quarterback is playing well, and all the Steelers ships are rising right now with Kenny Pickett's phenomenal play. Now, looking at the backfield, Najee Harris and Jalen Warren both scored the touchdowns in Kenny Pickett's 2 drives. The latter is now been more involved with the ones that he ever has been before. 16 snaps did go to Najee. He's still technically the lead back here, but 12 snaps go to Jaylen Warren. Are they just testing things out and trying to see what they have? Maybe. Tomlin has typically preferred that absolute workhorse dominant back, but Warren continues to outperform Najee Harris on a touch-by-touch basis. What if he's this year's Tony Pollard? And it's just, I'm not saying that Najee Harris has just been run down like Zeke has at this stage of his career, but Warren just continues to be that much more and more impactful. He could eventually take this backfield over. At minimum, one of my favorite late-round sleeper picks is Jaylen Warren. You have to be a bit lower on Najee Harris. The more and more we see Warren get involved. Again, 16 snaps on the preseason with the ones for Harris, 12s with the ones for Jaylen Warren. Much closer of a split than we saw last year when we only saw about 17% of the work go to Jaylen Warren. No Falcons notes, really. They rested all their starters. So moving to the Colts and Eagles, we get an extended look at Anthony Richardson, seeing both the highs and lows of his games. And what we knew, the lows, the throwing 6 of 17, pretty abysmal there, 78 yards, but that's not why you're drafting him. As we talked about last week on our sleeper show, our man Mo very clearly outlined the Konami upside. Any quarterback that has run for at least 700 yards has been a top 10 quarterback, and we saw brief glimpses of that from Richardson in this game as well. 5 carries, 38 yards, a 15-yard scramble, breaking some tackles. He also had another run negated, another 15-yarder negated by a holding. So ultimately, no designed rushes either. So I don't think they're really Shane Steichen calling the plays they could be for Anthony Richardson right now. Obviously, you don't want to run him up the gut in the preseason and have him get hurt. So I think we're going to see him fully unleashed. This has not discouraged me from thinking he's a phenomenal sleeper in Anthony Richardson. I continue to want to hammer him, but it does make me want, as I've been preaching, Daniel Jones a bit more, because I think his passing ceiling is much more stable, even if the rushing ceiling for Richardson is higher. But I love pairing those two. Around 9-10 turn, get both those guys. I think you're in phenomenal shape with 2 huge upside QBs at that range. Still very solid performance, though, on the ground for Richardson. Would love to see him continue to progress, but we knew the warts were going to be there. So it's just a matter of the growing pains. You got to be able to stomach them. Michael Pittman, we're going to talk about him in more depth later. He did have 5 targets. You'll like to see that. Led the team, but only 2 catches, 24 yards. Inaccuracy is going to be a major reason I consider him a bust, which we'll sneak peek talking about later. Eagles, no real notes, no starters, but it was good to note that Rashad Penny did not play. He got rested. There's some rumblings. Maybe he's going to get cut, and he's all the way down on 4th string. But lots of positive buzz lately that they've started to emerge with what a vision they have for Rashad Penny, rather. Very explosive runner. All he really has had to do is stay healthy, which is, of course, the big rub there. But with the holes he's going to see, I know he's going to be impactful for some stretches, maybe in your fantasy playoffs. Who knows when those stretches come? But he's going to be a beast behind this line whenever he gets to work. So good to see that he's pretty much secured his roster spot there, Rashad Penny. Pats, Titans, we can move through this one quick. Not much to take away other than Tajay Spears. He has a nice rep. 20-yard run, starts ahead of all the other backups. It's clear he has locked down that number 2 role. So when you're looking for your handcuff for Derrick Henry, I think Tajay Spears is where you got to go. He's been one of my favorite sleepers. Again, if you missed last week, go back and check out our sleeper episode. It was phenomenal stuff, but just another promising effort. He only goes for 28 yards on his 9 carries. Does rip off a nice 13 yards receiving as well on a team-high 3 targets. We talked about force-feeding him the ball, so maybe there is a role he can carve out alongside Derrick Henry and achieve that handcuff with benefits that we always like to talk about, where it's not just an injury that gives him value. Could see that definitely for Tajay Spears. Got to talk about my quarterback sleeper from last week's episode, continuing to rise up the ranks. That's Brock Purdy. Trey Lance is gone. Ding dong, the witch is dead. Oh no, nothing was ever going to be anything. Trey Lance, I'm glad I was able to move that guy off my dynasty team for Daniel Jones earlier this offseason. Very happy to see him gone. Not that I was overly worried that he'd be breathing down Purdy's neck, but when the team give up, legitimately, if you look at like the Dolphins, what they got out of the trade versus what the Niners did, it's just disgusting how lopsided that deal is. So there's always the risk that, like, if something happened or Purdy wasn't phenomenal, that they'd want to go and see what they have in their investment. Great that he shipped away. That one just gives us a nice, easy, raises the floor. There's no real benching risk here. And then 2, Purdy just continues to look real solid. 5 of 9, 73 yards, scores a rushing touchdown himself. Should have led in his 2 drives 2 touchdowns, but they did have a fumble at the goal line from their running back. Ultimately, Purdy finishes 9 of 14 passing, 138 yards with a rushing touchdown, passing touchdown, looking very, very solid in about a quarter of action so far this preseason. His top 2 targets also look great. Deebo Samuel is now up to 6 targets on the preseason, 4 catches, 57 yards, looking like Deebo of 2 years ago. Very, very explosive. I know we have mixed opinions on him, SJ staff, but I am in the opinion I'm all back in 3rd round. I love him there. Brandon Ayuk also looking solid as well. 4 targets, goes 2 for 50 ultimately on the preseason, just narrowly missing a touchdown in this game as well. No real Chargers notes, although Quentin Johnson continues to play and Josh Palmer doesn't. So to me, you're never drafting Quentin Johnson anyways to give you a week 1 start. It's always a long tail type of upside. The rookies often take half a season or longer to break out, and that's why you'd be drafting Quentin Johnson in redraft purposes, but it does seem pretty notable. He is firmly behind Josh Palmer at this point, so I continue to let him fall. And at a certain point, yes, you got to take a stab on those type of upside picks, but right now, I don't like where he's going. There's certain guys around Elijah Moore. I'd rather have the more established guy that's playing every down that also has some upside and some juice. Moving forward to the Panthers-Lions game, this was the best we've seen Bryce Young look. He was evading tacklers. The line wasn't playing amazing, but Bryce Young was scrambling, making throws on the run. He ultimately goes 7 of 12, 73 yards, and a score. But by far his best performance. Also adding 21 yards on the ground, showing that little Konami upside. Not a ton of it, but just enough that you rack up 20, 30, 40 yards. Boom, 4 more points. Not a bad thing to add to your repertoire. The bigger takeaway to me, though, Adam Thielen, absolute target hog, one of my higher-owned receivers. Unsexy upside. We've preached that before. He was on our projections that pop series that someone's going to have to emerge here. Why not the always reliable Adam Thielen, especially in the red zone area? He's always been a monster there, and he showed a gear that people were questioning whether he had it or not. 5 targets, clearly led the way here. hauls in 4 of them for 48 yards and a touchdown. Really impressive performance from him. Just a really nice connection. It was clear that was where Bryce Young was going. 1st, 2nd, 3rd read. He loved Adam Thielen there. Nice little bump up for him, even though I already was quite high on him. And then Mingo continues to start, sees 2 targets, 1 catch, 14 yards. A mid performance, but the big thing is he's still running with the ones here. Chark is banged up. I still think Mingo makes a nice upside stab in the later rounds of your draft, but I do prefer Thielen. I always have and continue to based on this performance. Packers, Seahawks, nothing of note from the Seahawks, no real starters, but Jordan Love gets yet another little bit of burn, plays about 1.5 quarters, and goes 9 of 15, 63 and a TD. Just another touchdown drive for the big man. Ultimately, this was probably his shakiest performance, and still not too shabby. Ultimately, on the preseason, 21 of 33, 193 yards, and 3 touchdowns for Jordan Love, 109.8 passer rating, and about 3 quarters of action. Really solid. I think he continues to show that QB2 upside he's got. I still prefer Brock Purdy a round or 2 later, but if you want to go in on this Packers attack, it does seem like they'll be nice and stable under Jordan Love, not a huge drop-off. The Packers keep getting away with these franchise QBs in the late rounds. Impressive work from that squad there. Moving to the Chiefs-Browns, this is one of those lines where 5 of 10, 92 yards, touchdown for Deshaun Watson. It looks good on paper, but if you watched it, and I watched the game back, he looked hesitant. He wasn't reading the field. He was just shaky all night. And this was playing against the Chiefs' number 2 defense. I was not impressed. Over half the yards came on a 53-yarder to Cooper. And I hate people take away the long throw and then he threw it. I'm not doing that. I get it. He made a nice long completion, and that's great. But otherwise, he really did not look great. It was that shaky, skittish quarterback we saw at the end of last year. I don't know. Beat reports have been all over the place that he looks much more calm and collected. And then we get joint practice reports that he's getting just absolutely demolished by the Eagles and looks as awful as he ever has. I'm leaning on the other side. Either way, I don't need to find out. We'll talk about Watson later on the BUSTS, but I was not encouraged despite the line. Some people might come up looking at the box score saying, oh, wow, 92 and a touchdown. Watson's back. I think there's a lot of reasons to be skeptical of that performance. And Rashee Rice on the other side of things, after an amazing 8-catch, 96-yard day in week 2, looking like he could carve out a nice, meaningful row. Ooh, 3 drops. And at the end of the day, if you're dropping the ball, doesn't matter how much more athletic or how much more open you're getting. And he was wide open on one of these drops. I mean, not a defender, even 10 yards within him. Nicely thrown ball, would have been a touchdown for about 50 yards, and he just fumbles it up. That's not going to get you on the field with the GOAT, Pat Mahomes. And so this definitely also helps Richie James out, who played well ahead of Rashee Rice anyways. And then Rice comes in and stinks it up all over the field with those drops. Definitely a guy that I'm intrigued in long term. Just he's part of the Chiefs offense. Maybe he can carve himself out, but these are not going to help him out when he does this. You also have Kadarius Toney returning in a week, so another reason to be a little bit less optimistic on Rashee Rice after this game. No real notes in the Cardinals-Vikings, no real starters play, so we move forward into the Bills versus the Bears game, where all the starters did play. Allen looks sharp, 5'7", 49 yards, doesn't throw or run the touchdown, and Gabe Davis leading the way, 3 targets, another one of our sleepers from last week. Go back and watch it if you haven't. Continue to say that for you. Definitely our guys looking good, though, in this week. Like to see that. And the big thing, though, this is a little bit discouraging, and I don't want to say Cook is dead. He looks good, plays first 9 snaps with the starters, 23 yards on 5 carries, solid per clip, 2 catches, 14 yards, very involved as a receiver. You love to see all that. But then Damian Harris comes in and pounds in the 1-yard touchdown, his first time active this preseason. The goal line hammer roll we were worried about. Now, we did see Cook running an 8-yard scamper in week 1 of the preseason, but Damian Harris wasn't active then. This was what I always was worried about, what I was always envisioning when I was fading James Cook earlier in the preseason. You don't want a running back that's getting pulled off the field inside the 10-yard line, and that could very well be James Cook. Now, I'm not going to cross him off and fade him. I think he's a very talented back in a great offense. All the reports are he's been a 3-down guy. So even with a cap TD ceiling, there's still plenty of value with James Cook, but this does have to concern you. It's ultimately, is he really going to ever be able to break into true running back 1 territory when not only Josh Allen, but now maybe even Damian Harris is vulturing him? Something you have to consider moving forward. For the Bears, Justin Fields looks pretty meh, 2 of 6, 51 yards. Does hit a boomer to DJ Moore, who led the way with 2 targets and a 41-yard catch. Also runs Justin Fields 3 carries, 16 yards. Just wasn't that crazy efficient performance we saw 2 weeks ago when he played. Meanwhile, Herbert, he splits the work with him, and he gets the first couple carries, first back in. You still like to see that, but you were hoping after that booming touchdown that he had that maybe he had a clearer separation, and Foreman was mixing in with the Justin Fields unit. He did get a little banged up, but still ultimately played more than I would have liked to see. It does seem like, and Rashawn Johnson also looked pretty good too. I do think Foreman and Herbert are the definite main committee here, but then you got to consider it not just a 2-headed committee, even if that is the case, because Justin Fields is as big, if not the biggest rushing component of this entire offense. So 3-headed nightmare and a offense in general. I'm a little bit less bullish on Khalil Herbert. He was going around the Antonio Gibson range, and I've always been on the Gibson train. I think that's where we want to be going moving forward. Moving on to the Jets versus Giants. Nothing of note for the Giants. They rest everybody other than Jalen Hyatt for the receiving core. So clearly he's not going to be starting week 1, but we did see something that you might miss if you're box score watching only. He blew by Sauce Gardner. I mean, he had tons of separation and then ultimately was overthrown by Tyrod Taylor. But it was just one of those things. Again, the winner of the wide receiver college player of the year. He's a beast. I love Jalen Hyatt. And yes, Paris Campbell, Hodgins, Slayton, they all get the night off. They're all ahead of the Rook. But he has a gear that none of them have. He has the ability to become that true number 1 all over the field. He was in college. He looks just like that mismatched nightmare. Everyone thought it was all scheme, and maybe Daboll's just that much of a genius. He's getting this guy wide open too. But if you can blow past Sauce Gardner in coverage, you got some real skills. So had he not been overthrown, we'd probably be talking about like a 3+ round jump in ADP right now, given a touchdown had he scored that. So I'm glad Tyrod Taylor overthrew him. I'm still going to be taking him now that he's not a starter and he's fallen late. He definitely, by the end of the season, is the most intriguing guy here. But if you need that immediate upside, go for Campbell, go for Hodgins, go for Slayton in the later rounds. But I still think Hyatt's the big guy. You do want to then look, though, at the Jets, and what a great showing from Aaron Rodgers and especially Garrett Wilson. His first preseason action, Aaron Rodgers, since 2018, goes 5 of 8, 47 in the TD. But the big thing, 4 of his targets, 50% of them, go straight to Garrett Wilson as if he was Devontae Adams and we were in Green Bay, baby. 3 catches, 30 yards, including a touchdown that had almost no separation. In fact, exactly 1.4 yards of separation according to Next Gen Stats. And Aaron Rodgers zips it in, as if, again, like Devontae Adams, the chemistry, the timing, the trust. it's all there. That's all you need to see. And I do think Garrett Wilson, maybe not quite Adams level receiver, but man, he really could develop into that type of player. So I love Garrett Wilson. I always have, and this just confirmed all the reasons why. Moving forward to the Bucks versus Ravens, a couple last games here. Baker Mayfield looks stunningly good again. 6 for 6, 43 yards, a touchdown. This now brings him now to completing all but one pass on the preseason. 14 of 15, 105 yards, and 2 TDs in just about 3 drives of action. Really impressive stuff from Baker Mayfield. Could he beat this year's Geno Smith, where he's got Chris Godwin and Mike Evans on the outside, 2 beastly weapons? All he really has to do is be confident, and it's looking like he will. This is a pass-happy attack under Todd Bowles for many, many years. So definitely encouraging here. And Mayfield becoming a guy that if you're desperate for a QB2 in 2 QB leagues, he's well worth a bench stash and wouldn't be shocked at all if he is the 2023 Geno Smith. His main man, definitely Chris Godwin, who looked absolutely like himself, definitely showed some more springiness and quickness out of his cuts, just like he was saying he did. Great to see it be put on tape there, too. Gets 4 targets. All 4 of them get hauled in. Ultimately, he goes Chris Godwin for 30 yards and a touchdown on those 4 catches. Looking great. And I got to mention Rachaad White also looking solid. He plays every single snap with the starters. A lot of talk that Sean Tucker is going to rumble in and take over and split this backfield. He doesn't come into the second half at all. Rachaad White was the exclusive first-team running back. 7 carries, 39 yards, over 5 yards a pop. You like to see it. He did have a catch for 2 yards, obviously not what you're looking for there, but involved in every facet of the game and looking solid while doing it. Good performance here from the Bucs offense in general. Very, very encouraging performance. And then into the Jets and Dolphins here. Trevor Lawrence just looks money again, driving it. The Dolphins played their first team D, and he made them their bitch. Trevor Lawrence, 8 for 10, 92 yards. Should have been 2 touchdown scoring drives, but Tank Bigsby did fumble at the 1-yard line. We'll talk about that in a second. But the big thing, looking great with Ridley here. Calvin Ridley, one of our guys. Love it, love. 3 targets, 3 catches, 50 yards, including that insane 28-yard. If you haven't seen it yet, go look it up. It was the Calvin Ridley of old. He looks as if he was never off the field. So all the risk about missing 2 years, what's he going to look like? You can erase those doubts. It's just a matter of can he stay healthy at this point, because he's the number 1 for an ascending quarterback and an offense that looks ready to take it to the next level. All in on Calvin Ridley at that mid-3rd round, maybe even a little earlier price tag. I'm all about it. Now, the backfield, we saw Tank Bigsby get 36% of the snaps with the starters, and he looked very good. 6 carries, 37 yards. He's been rumbling all preseason. He did, as we alluded to, though, fumble at the goal line. Something to watch. I wonder if that cost some goal line snaps later. Etienne did pound in a touchdown later in the game as well, something he did not do well last year. I don't think this is ultimately a death knell by any means for Tank Bigsby. He's still a guy. They continue to play him afterwards. But if he doesn't cement that goal line role, and fumbling at the stripe is not going to help him, that certainly would boost Etienne up and definitely take a little bit of shine off Bigsby. He still remains one of the ultimate handcuffs with benefits, though. Got to mention in the next game, Broncos versus Rams, nothing of note for the Rams, but Marvin Mims, with Judy out, this guy could truly rocket up into sleep. Just could blow up. He's the number 2 receiver for Scott Barrett, one of my favorite analysts in the game, pre-draft guys, for all the production he put up, all the measurables, everything about his profile, Barrett loved. And now he's stepping into a Sean Payton offense, hand-selected by Sean Payton. The first pick of the Sean Payton era is going to be looking at a great opportunity with Judy now a few weeks at least away from returning. And Mims just barely misses a 75-yard touchdown. He does ultimately rack up 2 catches for 51 yards. He's always been an elite deep threat. Maybe more is going to be added to his plate now in the future. I love it. He's going right now around pick 150. Steal him all day. Had we been able to record that sleeper show again, I think I can agree that we would absolutely be adding Marvin Mims to the top of our sleeper list at this point. So go out and get him. There's no doubt about it. And just wanted to note Alberto, a quick sighting of him, 7 catches, 8 targets, 109 and a touchdown. He's always been a freakish athlete at tight end, just always needed an opportunity. I don't know that he's going to get it. I think he's behind Dolchich and Adam Troutman, maybe even at risk of getting cut, but just nice to see. And Sean Payton has always used his tight ends well. So should Alberto make this team? Maybe not a bad dynasty stash, certainly not a redraft guy, but Marvin Mims, definitely the story of the night, flashing that deep speed, showing why he was rated by many people as a top 3 wide receiver of this class. And then the last game of the night, Texans versus Saints. No Saints starters. They do give Kendre Miller some featured burn, and he was meh. 14 yards on 8 carries, just very, very pedestrian. That's good news for Jamal Williams, for Alvin Kamara. The competition, the main guy they brought in and were so thrilled to get, hasn't really flashed at all so far this preseason. He has a couple catches, 3 catches, 10 yards. Those both Kamara, Jamal Williams, feeling much more secure. In particular, I love Kamara at that price. I'm not a big Jamal Williams guy. 3-week rental doesn't intrigue me, but I am much into a reborn, just ready to get after it, Alvin Kamara, who has regained his speed by all accounts. Kendre Miller just being so meh makes me feel that much better about going in around 7-8 Kamara and scooping up some nice value there. On the other side of things, CJ Stroud, 2 of 4, 16 yards, his first NFL touchdown. Nice to see. 3-yard and Nico Collins made a couple other real nice throws, but was plagued by a couple bad drops. Still, definitely his most encouraging performance. Good to see Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, some of these rookies getting their legs under them. It always takes a bit. Nice to see the preseason, that progression, so maybe they hit the regular season running. The bigger story, though, is Dameon Pierce looking solid again, playing exclusively the first 2 drives with CJ Stroud. 5 carries, 30 yards, a nice 13-yard rip up the gut. Pierce looks very damn solid, and he's playing all the passing downs, which is the big thing. He was removed almost on every single one of them last year. He's played every single one of them so far this preseason. So great to see for Dameon Pierce securing that 3-down value. That's really the only thing in his way from a true top 12 season. I love him at that round 5-6 turn. Great spot to look for Dameon Pierce. And that wraps up all of my preseason week 3 takeaways. Wolfpack, thank you again so much for tuning in for that. If you enjoyed what you heard, that thumbs up button is so greatly appreciated. We'll now be moving into our next featured segment. And for that, I will welcome in, as always, these last couple of weeks, my man Mo. How are we doing, bro?
Oh, I couldn't be doing better. Got my first home league redraft draft out of the way last night, so things are fully in the swing, and I'm ready to get going.
Do you like the squad? You didn't even send it to me. How did it turn out?
Oh, pretty good. I had the 14th pick in a 14-man league, so had to get pretty creative with how it went, but ended up with St. Brown and someone you might not like so much, CeeDee Lamb, there at the first turn, and then ended up with Watson and Mike Williams, Ramondre were the highlights.
Not bad at all. Good start to the draft. I'd love to see the full roster at the end. Sounds like you played the turn well. That's a tricky spot, especially in a 14-teamer where the picks are flying and it just gets so thin so fast. That's a really hard spot to be in to draft from, the turns in a 14-man league. So I like how you started it. I'm excited to see the full roster at the end of the day. Good stuff. I got my college league tonight. My old Holy Cross buddies. Can't wait to rip that one up at 8 o'clock tonight.
That's always a good time.
Oh, yeah. We've had this one long running, a few $100 on the line, too. So it's been a while since I took this one down. I need to get it going again. So it's the best. We're in draft season. It's like nothing better. This is always
the best time of the year.
Yes, indeed. Our man, The Truth, will be joining us eventually. So we will definitely see him soon. Just want to make sure to pump as well tomorrow. Me and Mo, you're joining me tomorrow, right?
Yep.
Yeah, we got good old Justin Herzig. If you don't know him, he won $1 million drafting best ball just a couple seasons ago. The absolute legend, great game theory as well. So he'll be joining me and Mo for a draft. He's going to probably rip my portfolio to shreds. I'm going to show him my highest owned and my strategy so far. And I doubt it's too typical. I'm still pretty new to the best ball game, even though I'm tossing a lot of money into it. So I'm excited to get his expert opinion. If you guys have some time tomorrow, 6:30, we'll be going live and chatting and doing a draft with Justin. So definitely check that out. And right on time, my man, The Truth. What's going on, brother?
Not much. I'm really excited for this.
Yeah.
Because I got,
obviously I'm going to listen to you guys most of the time, but I got some real thoughts on some of these, and I got a couple random ones that you guys might rip me to shreds for, because most of mine are just like, my gut doesn't feel right with this guy. Whereas you guys have like slews of data to back up all your crazy picks. But I do want to say, just before we get into it, I'm also extra amped. If it seems like, I've had like 4 cups of coffee or something, I haven't had any. But what did happen is my 8-year-old talked a bunch of shit to me about beating me in Wii Fit boxing. And so I finally was like, all right, let's go. And I knocked his ass out. So I'm feeling myself a little bit.
Kicking your son's ass in boxing, baby. What's better than that?
He asked for it. He had a lot of thoughts, but I put him down. So anyway, I'm feeling good. Undefeated on the day. I cannot wait to mediate this confrontation. I feel like I'm the sheriff coming into town.
Hell yeah, let's go. Coming in hot here, and we haven't even previewed it. We're talking about busts, ladies and gentlemen, which is always a great way to get heated. And as you guys know, with Roto Street, we don't want to just be your typical show. So yeah, we'll have a couple of the common bust picks because I agree with a lot of them too. But we're really going out on a limb, and I just want to make sure we define the busts as well. Not that there's going to be some names on here, like sneak peek. We're about to talk about Pat Mahomes as a bust. We know he's not going to be horrendous and ruin anybody's fantasy season. He's going to be solid. But when we're talking about busts, we're talking about a little bit overvalued guys we don't think are going to be worth the price you're paying, largely because of opportunity cost. If you're drafting this guy, you could have also had this player, and you should have taken that player instead, is what we're going to be getting at. And we're going to go for some big names because it's not that helpful to tell you some round, obscure 15 third-string backups going to bust. That doesn't do anything for you. So we want to look at those early round to mid-round picks that maybe you're going a little too high for our taste, and talk about why and see if there's other options instead. Does that seem to kind of define bust right for you guys?
Yeah, that's basically how I'll be approaching this.
Yeah,
perfect.
But also, like, let's not qualify this again and again and again. Like, we want that smoke. So you know.
Oh yeah, no, one from the top.
The headline here that is going to get people in the door is MOH of the Roto Street Journal declares Pat Mahomes bust. And
Why don't we start off with that?
We're tipping our hand a little bit. We're tipping our hand a little bit because that's going to be right off the bat. I want to remind you of the banner. You told me to remind you about the banners, but it looks like you're good. So getting into it, I mean, this is like opening a set with like your best song or something like that, and all of a sudden the crowd's just rocking right away. So he's coming off the top rope right ahead. It says it right there on the screen, banner. MOH is QB bust. Pat Mahomes. Talk to it.
I don't see why I shouldn't come out guns blazing tonight.
No, do it.
Let's get into it. Like Wolf said, I want to highlight that this isn't an argument of talent. It's an argument of cost. Currently, Mahomes is going at the 1-2 turn at the 14th overall pick. Obviously, at that price, the first QB off the board. But I just don't really – I can't ever imagine myself taking him in that range. The first off is, like you mentioned, opportunity cost. Who else is there? Who else could you be taking? And just to name a few players, you've got A.J. Brown, Nick Chubb, Tony Pollard, someone who I talked about absolutely loving in that spot, Garrett Wilson, CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown. These are all guys that I think can end up being elite players at their positions. All of them, I think, have overall number one upside at their positions. And I don't know how you can justify taking a onesie position like Mahomes that much higher, especially when he won't give you that edge like Travis Kelce might at that onesie position. So the next thing I want to talk about is that edge. Mahomes, if you're taking Mahomes in this range, you basically have to be saying it's guaranteed that Patrick Mahomes is going to finish as the QB1 this season. And I just don't really think he will. First, through week 9 last year, before an elbow injury, Josh Allen was the QB1 by a full 2 points. And then through week 15, Jalen Hurts was the QB1 before he injured his shoulder by a full point per game over Patrick Mahomes. If there weren't injuries, and obviously like Allen is a little bit different story because that was week 9, but through week 15, that's almost the full season. If it weren't for that injury to Jalen Hurts, Mahomes wouldn't have been the QB1 last year. And I don't think it's crazy to say that there's a good 3 to 4 names that can contend with Mahomes for the overall QB1, but you can get all of those guys a good 2 to 3 rounds later. And those guys like Allen and Hurts, they're going in a range, and you might be able to get them early 3rd round. And in my opinion, that's where talent takes a little bit of a drop off. Like names like Travis Etienne are going in that range. Devonta Smith. I prefer the quarterback in that range to those skill position players. So I prefer just waiting the couple of rounds and getting someone like a Herbert, a Lamar, an Allen, a Hurts, and not paying that super steep price.
In all honesty, I agree 110%. I actually have Mahomes as my QB3, despite him going, as you mentioned, at least 1 round above the other guys. the stat you mentioned with Josh Allen, he was averaging 30 points per game, the most in NFL and fantasy history before that injury. So I'm with you there, especially that you can get him around later, and the talent there does get a little bit more shallower. The opportunity cost goes down in that range. So if I'm going for the elite quarterback, even if I had all three of them stacked up at the same price, Mahomes to me has the lowest ceiling, maybe the highest floor of them. You know he's going to do his thing. He's going to be very good. But ultimately, what if something happens to Kelsey? He's 35 years old. We all assume he's impossible to touch. What if something goes down? Who's he throwing to? Kadarius Toney's a walking corpse. You never know. It's just a weak receiving core outside of that true main number one. I'm sure he'd be fine. The fact that he was better without Tyreek Hill is just like, it still blows my mind. I'm sure he'd get it done still, but I'm with you. The opportunity cost is just that much greater with Mahomes for, a better floor, but even a lower ceiling. I'm with you. I think he's a bust relative to his cost.
There's absolutely nothing. Go ahead, Mike.
Oh, I was going to say, I agree. I wrote down, I didn't get to it, but I think that this offense is kind of fragile outside of Kelsey. If he goes down last year and before, he had that stable presence at the receiver position. I mean, Tyreek Hill is a different story, but last year he had Juju Smith-Schuster, someone who's established in this league and is a stable presence in that wide receiver room. This year, that's just not the case. If Kelsey goes down, he has been healthy throughout the majority of his career. But if he goes down, I don't know what happens to this offense. I just think it's all around kind of fragile.
I would say two things. First off, extremely good argument and agreed with pretty much every single thing that you said. Second thing is I think that Pat Mahomes kind of addressing you saying that their offense is fragile. It's like I see that. And at the same time, I feel like Mahomes at this point has kind of earned the respect of until you throw a random group of guys on his team and he just can't make anything work with him, I'm just going to assume that he's going to be able to make it work. And with that said, I absolutely agree with you. I would never pick him around the 1-2 turn. I mean, there's just no way. Like there's, maybe around the 2-3 turn, but probably even later. I feel like the Wolf picked Jalen Hurts third round in our mock draft.
Yep.
Which was a good pick, and that's kind of where a little mini quarterback run, Hurts, Allen, Fields maybe went around there. You just as soon have just about any of those guys as Mahomes. I agree with you. Lower ceiling for Mahomes, maybe higher floor. There's no way I'm taking him discernibly above all those other guys.
Yeah.
With that said, go ahead.
I'll pull up my guy. Certainly less buzzy than that, and I do have some bigger names to come, but I just had to get this one off my chest. I do not understand Deshaun Watson's price at all. The quarterback 9, 81 overall. I find it absolutely disgusting. One, just he's a disgusting human, but I'm not. Whatever. Just take that all off the field. I don't even care. I still do not understand anything at all about this price tag. I have 6 to 7 quarterbacks going in my rankings well ahead of him, and 5 to 6 of those guys go about 2 rounds later. So I have no interest at all in Deshaun Watson. For one, he just looked at flat out terrible his return to the NFL field. And right now at this point, yes, I get his track record 3 years ago, quarterback 5 in points per game every year of his career until he took 2 years off, was getting tugged away, and now just kind of sucks. I haven't seen him look good yet. He didn't look good in the preseason, 5 of 10, 90 yards and a touchdown. The counting stats looked okay, and ultimately that's all we care about in fantasy, but so skittish and not comfortable in all the things you saw last year that made you worried. He went 6.7, 19.1, 14.2, 13.2 before closing the season okay last year, 23 points and then 19 points. But he only had 2 quarterback 1 performances, very mediocre, and just, again, how bad it all looked the entire time. So I don't like anything about him. I get the weapons upgrades. It looks fine. But to me, there's nothing that you're getting from Deshaun Watson that you're also not able to get from a Daniel Jones, from the upside of Anthony Richardson. Those guys going 2+ rounds later than him. You knew I had to bring Daniel Jones up on a podcast, of course, but I just don't understand. Even in a vacuum, I'd rather have Daniel Jones if they're the same price. The fact that I can get Daniel Jones 24 picks later, it makes no sense to me at all. I am definitely in the camp. I need to see it before I believe it with him. Plus, I just don't think this is a good schematic fit between him and Stefanski. There seems to be weird tension there, and it's just not – it's a run-heavy offense. It's not that spread in the shotgun type of feel that you want Watson running around and slinging in. I just don't like him at all. Not touching Deshaun Watson at really any price, but certainly not quarterback 9.
Go ahead, Mike.
I mean, I agree. He's definitely someone that I I think I'm fading at his price just because of the uncertainty. I like to buy into the uncertainty of certain players, but I don't know. I just, like you said, he has looked like he struggled throughout the preseason. He's just not someone that I'm super interested at cost. Like you said, I'd rather have Daniel Jones. I'd rather have Tua, who's going behind him as well. I think you can get Anthony Richardson behind him even in almost every single league. So there's certain options that I'd much rather take, especially given I believe he's going in the eighth round right now. There's just a handful of quarterbacks who are going that 9-10 range that I would also much rather have.
Yeah.
So just to give you a clear point of reference here, first of all, I agree with you. I think I will not be owning any Deshaun Watson this year. Absolutely not. No question about it. I don't care where I can get him. Jimmy took Deshaun Watson right after the 6-7 turn in our draft. After that, it was a full round and a half before Tua was taken. Then it was a full 2 rounds before Dak Prescott went. And then I got Daniel Jones like 3.5 rounds after, and Anthony Richardson also went right around there. And I would take literally any of those guys before Watson without giving it a second thought. And we're talking about, like, in my case with Jones, we're talking about 40 picks later. So that's nuts in my opinion. I agree, Wolf.
And it's just in addition to just the quarterbacks that you can get later, that's right around where he's going is where I see a real steep drop off in running back. That's kind of where you can get the Gibsons, the last kind of usable running backs. And we're actually going to be dropping that tonight by draft guide. I went into the hole. I ended up banging out the entire draft guide with my man CJ this weekend. So I know some of you might have already drafted, and if you did, I'm sorry I'm late this year. You guys know the wedding and everything. It was a tough year. Got a little bit behind. My apologies for getting married. I should have, either way, I'll definitely be out earlier next year. And so you look at that, though. I was looking at the round 8 running backs. Well, one, you can get like Mike Evans, Jahan Dotson, Marquise Brown, Deontay Johnson, some guys we talked about receiver. Insane wide receiver 3 options. Plus, you got like James Cook, DeAndre Swift, Pacheco, Antonio Gibson. After that tier is done, then you're just really into the handcuff with benefits, which I still think they have a spot on your roster. But if you're looking for anything usable at your running back position, this is the round where that really drops off, in my opinion. And so it's such a bad opportunity cost, not only because there's so many similar, if not better, quarterbacks going later. The other positions just take a nice steep drop after this 7-8 kind of turn here, too. So I think it's just that much worse for Deshaun Watson to be picked there.
I would rather have Kirk Cousins than Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely. I have him right
I got Cousins in like the 13th round, and I'm not even saying that to get clickbait because obviously MOH is going to get all that with his Mahomes take. But yes, Kirk Cousins better than Watson.
Yeah. If you thought his Mahomes take was crazy, I think we got to move to running backs at this point. I was okay with the Mahomes one. Austin Eckler, I have no idea how you're going to ever sell this, but let's hear it.
I can't wait because his other bust, I'm on the train. That's another guy that I will not be owning one scrap of. But this one kind of made me do a double take. So all right, go ahead, keep blazing them guns, MOH.
Yeah. So coming out hot once again here with the running back pick, but going with the 4th overall pick in drafts, Austin Eckler. I will probably not have a single share of Austin Eckler unless he falls past pick 8 or 9. And I don't think that'll happen. But let me just get into why. So first, everyone knows if you've been playing fantasy football the last few years, Austin Eckler has been elite both of the last 2 years, and he's done so on the back of receiving work and touchdowns. The first point I just want to make, because it's kind of quick, is touchdowns. 38 touchdowns, total touchdowns, rushing and receiving between the last 2 seasons, so almost 20 touchdowns a year. First, that's really hard to replicate. I mean, there's not really a formula you can have to project how many touchdowns a player will have. Yes, I think this offense is going to be great and there will be plenty of scoring opportunities, but it's really hard to put up 20 touchdowns in 3 straight seasons, especially with the return of Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, who will hopefully stay healthy throughout the year. And then the addition of Quentin Johnston. I just don't know. There's not many outcomes where I think he replicates that 20 touchdown performance. So I don't think his current cost is worth it. And then moving on to the receiving work, he's maintained a 15 to 18% target share over the last handful of seasons while he's been in San Diego / Los Angeles. And once again, like I said, with the presence of these 3 high quality receivers, I don't know how he maintains that target share. I think it takes a dip. I don't think it'll be massive. Maybe we see him finish towards the lower range where he's like 15%, maybe even a little bit lower than that. I don't think it's going to be crazy, but I think he's certainly going to see a dip in the number of receptions as well as targets that he has. And I think part of this, not only because of the weapons that are in Los Angeles, but just the philosophical changes that I think will be coming to this offense because of the addition of Kellen Moore. Kellen Moore, just to put it simply, he does not like using running backs in the passing game. Over the 4 seasons that he was the offensive coordinator in Dallas, their running back target rate was never higher than 19th in the NFL. And there was 2 seasons where they were 26th or worse in running back target rate in the NFL. He just simply, it's not a part of his game plan. Obviously, I think he's smart enough to adjust to know what he has in Austin Eckler and bump those numbers up. But just the philosophical standpoint from Kellen Moore and how he likes to run his offense, I'm really scared for how Austin Eckler will be utilized in the receiving game. And considering that last year, 33% of Eckler's touches were receptions, I don't know. If that takes a hit, as well as the touchdowns, he could be a colossal bust at the second running back off the board and could end up ruining some teams. And the final thing I just want to say about it is about the opportunity cost once again. If Chase and Jefferson are off the board, I'm not passing up the opportunity to take Cooper Kupp or Tyreek Hill. We talked about this yesterday. I absolutely love these guys. Tyreek Hill and Cooper Kupp both had were pacing to have monster seasons, both dealt with different issues. Kupp with his own injury and Hill with the injury to Tua Tagovailoa. But I think they both could absolutely break fantasy this year, and I'm not passing up the opportunity to have one of those guys on my team.
I think the only part of that argument I can buy is I'm with you on the target hogs. I really love in my top 4 locking one of them down, but I still have no fault for anyone that wants to take Austin Eckler within those top 4 either. Yes, the touchdowns have been insane. 39 in 2 seasons just feels ridiculous, especially for a guy his size. But he is just an elite scorer. He gets behind his blockers so well. He's explosive in every single facet of the game. And even if he had taken away 8 touchdowns last year, he still would have been the RB2 ahead of everyone other than Christian McCaffrey in PPR leagues. And I know a lot of that's on the back of a ton of receiving work, and maybe that does dip too. That makes sense. Kellen Moore loves to sling it deep, and I think this whole offense as a whole will definitely get a bit more vertical, which probably will not play into Eckler's strengths. But we did see Pollard running some very nice wheel routes and being used quite well. I don't necessarily think you can get some traps, and I've definitely fallen in the traps too of a coach used this player this way, and so he's definitely going to go and have the same philosophy. But ultimately, Eckler is just so damn good and such a great mismatch that I think Kellen Moore, rather than saying, oh, geez, he doesn't like to throw to running backs, I think this guy is so damn bright. He's going to definitely use Eckler to his fullest potential. And I don't think the touchdowns are going to go away because I think this offense is going to take another step forward, and there's just going to be more scoring opportunities. So maybe a little bit less overall work, but I think the offense as a whole will be so much more efficient that another 15 to 20 touchdowns is honestly, I feel likely for Austin Eckler, assuming he doesn't get hurt. So I get the only real part of it is those top 4, the value of one of those top 4 receivers. Definitely I can get that. But especially if it's like a 2 receiver in a flex league, I definitely have no problem having Austin Eckler at that point creep into my top 3 because at that point you get so many good receivers deep and the running back pool just gets so shallow. If we're talking about home leagues, you guys know how those drafts go where running backs are flying. I'm not saying we should cater and just go to the entire what everyone else is doing. But in a 2 receiver league, it just becomes so much less valuable. So you got to know your settings. In a 3 receiver league, I get it. I would be with you too. The top 4 receivers go first. But I think Eckler scores almost as many, if not as many touchdowns in a more explosive attack, maybe a little less receiving work. But I love him in this offense. I think Kellen Moore's a genius, and I just can't wait to see how he uses the ultimate mismatch toy in Austin Eckler.
I'll say this. In the Roto Street Journal mock draft, Eckler went with the 5th pick. Me and MOH were 6-7. As soon as Eckler went off the board, I was like, oh, that's awesome. I'm going to get Kupp or Tyreek Hill. And I'm sure you thought the same thing. You're like, I can't lose. If Nat takes Kupp, I got Hill. If he takes Hill, I got Kupp. You love the start of that draft immediately. I was relieved when Eckler got taken because I was worried I was going to feel pressure to take him if he was still on the board. But I secretly wanted one of those receivers big time. Let me just ask you a couple either-ors for the rest of the round. Would you rather have Eckler than Bijan Robinson?
No. Oh, no. Eckler over Robinson? Yes, 110%. I
Yeah.
He was the next running back off the board in our draft, which I thought CJ Major League reached for, just for whatever it's worth. Then would you rather have Eckler than Stephon Diggs?
I have a draft on Thursday. We think we know how the first couple of picks will be going. I'll be taking Stephon Diggs ahead of Austin Eckler if they're both there.
Would you rather have Eckler than AJ Brown?
Yeah.
Yes.
Brown's going around 10 to 12. If Eckler got down to that range, I think at that point I wouldn't be able to convince myself.
All right, that's basically. Would you rather have Eckler than Barkley or Chubb?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Just checking. Are we going to go in to your next pick, or are we going to shoot one of the Wolf? Because I'm like I said, I'm all about your next pick.
We can head over to the Wolf, right? Yeah, his big one. Yeah.
We'll head on over to Josh Jacobs. In his first season at McDaniels, couldn't have gone any better. First in opportunities, 405, 340 rushes, 65 targets. First in rush yards, third in fantasy points. The undoubted fantasy MVP given his 6'7" price tag. I said fade him last year. I was dead wrong, but I'm going back to the well. I'm fading him this year. Only 5 running backs have ever had 390 touches in a single season across the last decade. Christian McCaffrey's next season, 76 touches, only plays 3 games. Derrick Henry, 237 touches, only plays 8 games. DeMarco Murray plays 15 games, but drops from 400 touches to 237 and becomes more of a committee back, just way less efficient than he was the year before. Le'Veon Bell holds out and then falters with the Jets the next season. Josh Jacobs is the next man on that list. It's not a good track record, literally 4 for 4 so far, that they have seriously regressed, whether it's injury, whether it's effectiveness. The workload risk is certainly there. If not, all beat writers are saying Jacobs is just so much better than Zamir White, so much better than everyone else. They expect it to just be the Jacobs show on a $12 million one-year prove-it deal. Should he buck the trend? Absolutely. Jacobs will pay off his late second, early third price tag. But to me, history's not on the side of backs with that workload. As much as I like Jacobs, the player, and what he showed last year, you're looking at T. Higgins and some really quality Jalen Waddle, Chris Olave, these nice, sturdy wide receiver 1s or wide receiver 2s for your team. I'd rather just have nice, safe, give me those points than play this risk of that just never has worked out for volume running backs in that sense.
I can't remember the specific stat, but it was something about the players who hit that 300-something touch threshold, and almost none of them have gone on to play a full season the next year. Obviously, you can't really project that just because injuries they're fluky. But I agree. The volume that Jacobs saw last year, I think it's definitely a concern to see how he holds up. And I'm not really very sure that this Raiders offense is just going to be even decent. I think they're going to be kind of poor. And that's obviously affects running backs more than it does the receivers. And I think if things really go south in Vegas this year, I think Josh Jacobs will end up being one of the worst picks in the draft. I agree. And now that he's signed that deal, in my draft that I had last night, he went early second round. So you're paying a lot higher price than you were just even a couple of weeks ago. So now that his price is rising pretty significantly, now that it's going to be fringe first round, I don't think I'll be having much of him. I think I'll be staying away.
And the holdout risk, the fact that I know he's not going to hold out at this point, but there's so many examples of people that didn't come to camp, report the week before. They start slow. They get hurt often. They just never seem to really get their footing. So there's just so much risk there, especially like you said, if the price is going up, now the opportunity cost, even if he was going at the end of the second, I didn't like that opportunity cost. If he's now scooching into the mid to early second, he could kill me 2 years in a row because I didn't have him at all last year, and that certainly was a reason why it was one of my least successful seasons. I faded Jacobs. He could certainly slap me around again, but I'm not buying it. I think he's busting this year.
Yeah, he's just one of those guys I'm letting someone else take.
Yeah,
I'm avoiding them.
All the picks that went around him in our draft, I would have taken like 4 picks before him and like the 5-6 picks after over him. Yeah, we faded the hell out of him. We didn't have room for taking any Jacobs last year because we were loading up on Allen Robinson. You only got so many roster spots.
You only got so many roster spots for those quality players. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, man. Well, moving into the mid rounds, rather than talking about those early 2 rounds, not too far, though, round 3, 4 type of guy is Travis Etienne. And I actually like this call. I'm excited to hear what you have to say, Mike.
Yeah, at this point, ETN, I checked today, mid-3rd round, RB11 off the board. So if you're regularly listening to the Fantasy Fullback Dive, you might have heard me talk about ETN a couple of weeks ago. And he's even more expensive than when I talked about him then. So I'm thinking he's even going to be an even bigger bust now. But like I said, if you listened a few weeks ago, you might have heard some of these points already. But the first thing I'm concerned with ETN is his lack of work in the passing game. Last year, 7.8% target share, 31st among running backs, which is in and of itself a concern. Second is Doug Peterson not historically using running backs in the passing game. Only once since he's been a head coach has a player had 50 or more receptions in a season. And I know truth like this one, that season, it was Miles Sanders in 2019. During that season, about a third of the games, Greg Ward was the number 1 option on that offense. I mean, who else are they going to throw the ball to? Of course, Sanders ended up with a bunch of catches. But now that we're back in Jacksonville, they've got Evan Ingram, who signed an extension, Christian Kirk, Zay Jones is returning, and now Ridley's in the picture. That 7.8% target share could even see a reduction with all these mouths to feed in this offense. So that's absolutely horrifying to me. I don't think he has very much receiving upside at all. And then, like I mentioned, Doug Peterson, his coaching philosophy doesn't really bode well for fantasy running backs. He prefers a running back by committee. In his time as a head coach, no running back has hit the 14 carries per game mark, which, once again, doesn't bode well for ETN whatsoever. He's not going to be that bell cow back. And throughout the offseason, Peterson made it pretty clear that he really wants to bring someone in to help out ETN and take some of the workload off of his shoulders. And they did just that. In the draft in the 3rd round, they brought in Tank Bigsby. He was someone you hit on earlier during your preseason week 3 recap, but he's going to be there in a complementary role to ETN. He could easily take the goal line work away, as you mentioned. And I just think everything that is brewing in Jacksonville just means disaster for Travis Etienne. We've been talking about it throughout the offseason. ETN not efficient at the goal line. He's not seeing those high-value touches. ETN not going to be heavily involved in the passing game. Another very high-value touch for running back. He won't be seeing many of those. And then this nasty timeshare that I think he's going to have with Bigsby, I just don't see how his mid-3rd round price pays off. So I'm not touching him with a 10-foot pole.
No.
Very definitive statement there from Truth. No.
No. Well, I mean, I was waiting to see if you had something to say. Then I was toying with making a dirty comment about the 10-foot pole and relating that to Teddy Bridgewater somehow. And then I decided I was going to take the moral high ground. No, I was actually waiting to see if you were going to say something first, because I do have something to say about him. He's going ahead of Joe Mixon.
It's crazy.
Don't you just think that's insane? He's going well. Would you rather have Etienne or Aaron Jones, Wolf?
See, I actually don't love Aaron Jones, so I think I'd rather have Etienne. But Mixon is 1,000 times a better fantasy pick, and that's where a lot of owners get into. I'll post Joe Mixon's the best value, and people will write, "Did you watch him play? He sucks. He's old. He's crusty." It's like, yeah, he's old and crusty, but he's going to score 15 touchdowns in the greatest setup in fantasy football. A featured back in the Bengals offense, the best line they've ever had. Sign me up all day for that. I don't care if he's inefficient or old and crusty. There's no. Is Chris Evans better? Come on. I mean, there's nothing there. And then you got Tank Bigsby, nice and fresh, as you mentioned. 28 carries, 159 yards so far in NFL action. He looks every bit like the guy that belongs, a thumper to take over those big, short yardage roles. I'm absolutely with you. I think Etienne, like the player, if he was used as a pass catcher more, which he definitely should be, he was a good receiver in college, I would definitely flip my tune here. But like you said, Mike, like if he was only seeing 7.8% last year, and now Calvin Ridley's here, who's we talked about in my preseason recap, an absolute bona fide number one just monster. There's no way. I'm 100% with you. I love the Greg Ward call it too. That's a great name. I just have to throw out. Do any of you remember the other? He was a big-bodied wide receiver for the Eagles that year. A little bit of trivia before we get into my next bust. Do any of you remember the name of this guy?
I think I know. So you go ahead first, Truth.
I was gonna say Alshon Jeffrey, but I feel like he's probably too big of a name.
No, he's too good. He'd be too good.
My good friend who got me through the end of my fantasy season on the in my playoff push, Travis Fulgham.
Yes, it is Travis Fulgham.
Yep.
Ding, ding, ding.
Yep.
I was not close to getting that one. I admit it. And sometimes it's like, oh, that was my next guess. No, that wasn't my next guess.
That is impressive, Mike. I'll give you that. That was good.
Horrifying receiving core.
Absolutely horrifying. The fact that Travis Fulgham was like an alpha for a brief stretch tells you every bit of why Miles Sanders saw 50 targets. So yeah, I'm with you there. I just don't see the path to the outs that ETN needs to truly hit his value, being touchdown spikes or receptions. And I do want pieces of this offense. If I'm paying that price range, I'd rather have Calvin Ridley. And I certainly have no problem going later and getting Evan Ingram. Even like I know Zay Jones is now the 3 here, but Christian Kirk's going around 7 or 8, and I like him plenty at that price tag. Trevor Lawrence himself, just get the engineer of the offense at around 8 or 9 and just be satisfied with that, because it is going to be a great offense. I do want pieces of it, but I think ETN being the most expensive piece doesn't really make sense to me. I'm with you there.
If his new teammate Calvin Ridley were a betting man, which I've heard he is, maybe he's spending the under on Travis Etienne all day long. Which he may already have done so, and just we don't know about it.
Exactly.
Find out next offseason.
Yeah.
He's going to be taking another year off.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man. Well, I'll go to my guy, and that's Kenneth Walker. And it's tough to say this because a lot of these guys, you can always give the preface, love the player, just don't love the situation. That's truly the case with Kenneth Walker. You know, one of the best in terms of explosive runs. I believe he was number 3 in the league in 10-plus yard runs. But he's also very boom or bust as a runner. If he's not getting like 8 to 10 yards, he also was towards the top in the league in runs to go for 1 to negative yards as well. He kind of dances around the line of scrimmage a bit, and Pete Carroll got pretty fed up with it. He called it out a few times last year. They go and draft Charbonnet, and all Carroll does is rave about him all preseason while we have Kenneth Walker banged up with this groin injury. Keep talking about how Charbonnet, man, do you see how he hits the hole, how he plays physical, how he gets – I just feel like a little bit of underlying shots were being taken at Kenneth Walker, who does run hard once he finally gets into space, but he does dance a little bit behind the line. So maybe the coach a little unsatisfied with him. Either way, Carroll has historically been inconsistent and tough to predict with how he rotates his backs. You think Chris Carson is running away with a job, and suddenly somebody else is coming in and taking all the work. So I just never trust Carroll in general with anything he says. All he's done is help hype up Zach Charbonnet, so maybe I shouldn't trust what he's saying there. But boom or bust in terms of his running style. He was also Kenneth Walker, a little bit boom and bust in his output. Just 3 top 12 weeks all of last year. None of them came after week 9, so he really started to slow down, which part of it is probably why they went and got a running back, because Walker did start to lose that explosiveness, did start to seem a little bit banged up to close out the season. So at a timeshare and an offense that I do think gets also a bit more pass happy, which is not Kenneth Walker's skill set. They've already hyped up Zach Charbonnet, beat writers and Pete Carroll being that lead third down back. If they're going to throw it more with Geno Smith, get a little bit more 3 wide when JSN is back there, that's not going to play to Kenneth Walker's strengths either. So going right now, round 4 or 5 turn or so, it's just a little bit too rich for me. There's still so many great receivers at that range. Or that's maybe where I go in after Justin Herbert, who I think could smash the passing record of the NFL this year. There's so many more intriguing players to me than a timeshare Kenneth Walker at this point, because when he was in the best full featured back role, he still wasn't that consistent or great, in my opinion. As good as he looked, the outputs just weren't that great. So not in on Kenneth Walker at his price.
Like you said, Pete Carroll, the king of coach speak. So everything I hear out of his mouth, I take with a grain of salt. Learned that the hard way over the years. But I agree with what you're saying for the most part. Kenneth Walker, he's just not someone I want to be relying on week in and week out. And at the price that you're paying for him, depending on roster construction, he'll probably be your second running back. And that means you're going to be relying on him each and every week. He's an explosive runner, like you mentioned. He can really get going, but I think he's just a better best ball target. And he's not I look for pretty good consistency out of my second running back. So if I can, not always the option, but he's someone that I think you need to draft with caution.
Yeah. And in these best ball drafts, he is starting to. I've seen him now start to fall to like round 6 sometime. And if you get him at a discount, I love the player enough that certainly there's always a price I'll buy him at. But in the 2 home league drafts I've done, he's been right there in like the mid to late 4th. And there's just so many more intriguing players in that range for me. So just be wary. Of course, there's a price for everybody. And in best ball, that's starting to be the case for Kenneth Walker for me. But right now, I just in home leagues, I've got to put some caution tape on him.
Yeah, the next 2 picks in our draft after Kenneth Walker were me and you actually. Like we picked Darren Waller and TJ Hawkinson with the next 2 picks after that, and I was like, I just hope he doesn't take he doesn't take Waller. I really wanted Waller. I was so relieved when he took Walker because I had absolutely no interest in him at all. Also, just as an aside, Jackson, who picked before me and then I picked before Mike, I'm just looking down his team from our mock draft, and it's just essentially all players that are on this list from one of you. It's like out of his first 10 guys, like 7 or 8 of them are on one of you. So,
and that makes me nervous because Jackson's a real sharp guy. Like he's one of our sharpest minds on staff. So
I know
Jackson's like loving scary. All our busts. That's definitely something for everybody out there to consider too, because he's definitely.
I know Jackson is really smart, but his first 5 picks were Eckler, Jonathan Taylor, and then Josh Allen, then Amari Cooper, Kenneth Walker, and then he throws in Pittman down the road too. So he's dipping his toe in the water.
Giving him a sneak peek of some of the busts that we're going to talk about the receiver position there, Truth.
I know. We're getting into them right now. Actually, before we get into wide receivers, give us a like if you have not already done so. We've definitely had a few people in the whole time. Tell your friends. Give us a like.
Bump that mailbag up too, baby. Would love to answer some questions ahead of your drafts. That's why we go live, especially this time of the year. Get the questions in. Let us know what quandaries you have heading into draft season. We'd love to answer those for you too. Yeah.
All right. Let's get into wide receivers. I thought you guys made excellent cases for your running backs as usual. And Mike, you going to start us off with Devontae Adams, or let's go to Devontae Adams, and then let's see what scorching take the Wolf has.
Well, we'll go with Tay here. Yeah, another guy that's being drafted pretty early that I'm kind of avoiding this year. Devontae Adams' current ADP is 12th overall, 7th wide receiver off the board. And if you look at how he performed last year, finishing as the wide receiver 3, Adams looks like a value here at the 1-2 turn. And I mean, I'm not going to say I'm completely passing on him. Like if he slips like into the mid to late 2nd round, yeah, sure, I would take him. But at his current price, I'm not super interested. Like I mentioned, finished as the wide receiver 3 on the year last year. But when you take a closer look, his season was kind of peculiar. And he had a season unlike he had ever had in his NFL career before. Last season, he heavily relied on deep ball and explosive plays to find his fantasy production. Last year, he was 2nd in deep targets, 3rd in air yards per targets, and he had 10 touchdowns that were 25 yards or longer. He has never had more than 3 touchdowns of this length across his previous 8 NFL seasons. So I think this was kind of an anomaly last year. I mean, he's never really done it to that degree, and to have 10 in one season, I think it's kind of insane. And these 10 plays accounted for 1/3 of his fantasy points. 33% came off of just 10 plays, and I mean, you can't take it away from him. The plays still happen, but still, I just don't think that these kinds of plays are the least reproducible plays in all of football. Catching those bombs. I remember Jared Stidham threw him like a 70-yard touchdown. Like, I just don't see that happening again this year, especially with the new quarterback that we've got in Las Vegas, Jimmy Garoppolo. Like I said earlier, Devontae Adams heavily relied on his good buddy Derek Carr pushing the ball downfield to him, getting those deep targets, and racking up air yards. What does Jimmy Garoppolo not do? He does not push the ball downfield. Across his NFL career, Jimmy Garoppolo has never finished higher than 24th in air yards per attempt. And considering that, first, I'm not as high on this Las Vegas offense as everyone else is. Nobody's super high on them, but I'm lower than the majority of people. I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so.
I was going to say, I'm with you.
Yeah, I think I'm lower than consensus even. But, with Jimmy not pushing the ball down the field, this offense potentially being a dumpster fire, I don't know. This price scares me, and this is his age 31 season. That drop off is going to happen soon. I mean, you can't. It's still Devontae Adams. Like, it's hard to make that argument. Like, he could easily still be A-okay, but I'd rather get off the ship earlier rather than later, and can all those 10 deep touchdowns just make everything seem like, not everything, but his insane performance last year seemed like a bit of an anomaly. I mean, I just don't think he can reproduce those deep scores, and I'll be avoiding him this year.
It's a compelling take for sure. Adams has earned, maybe this is more to a fault, the guy that you've had do it for you a couple years that you've won titles with, and you just can't let him go. He's earned for me. I'll believe the fall off when I see it, and I always get the be a year too early, get off the train rather than being a year too late. I totally get that, and maybe you'll be a year too late with Adams, but after finishing as the wide receiver 1, 4, 1, 2, and 5 in PPR points per game the last 5 seasons, that track record to me is something I'll continue to buy. Where he's going, 30% or higher market share for 4 straight seasons. The guy just commands targets, whether they're deep, whether they're short. That's the one thing that I'll poke the little hole in there is, like, yes, a lot of it was deep last year. There's no doubt about it. 2,129 air yards. That was insane. I think he led the NFL with that, and it's by far his career high in that. I get that. It's not going to happen with Jimmy Garoppolo, but it's not like he can't get it done in the short game, that he can't get it done after the catch. A lot of that is reliant with Aaron Rodgers on so much timing and chemistry, and I get that too. In fact, I actually have Garrett Wilson ahead of him, so I get that part of the argument as well. Like, if you're taking Adams, you're probably passing on Garrett Wilson, who now has his Aaron Rodgers, literally Aaron Rodgers with him, making those, and we saw in preseason week 3, those tight touchdown type of throws. I don't think those will be there with Jimmy Garoppolo, a conservative guy, so there's definitely room for concern. I am taking St. Brown. I'm taking Garrett Wilson ahead of him. So yeah, in a sense, I am kind of fading Adams, but I also have plenty of him too. If those 2 guys are gone and he's fallen to me in mid-round too, because I'm also taking Adams ahead of, and I guess this is just a nice little segue into my bust here, CeeDee Lamb. Again, it's tough to say because the guy is so damn good. I hate saying this for every pick. Love the player, but I just think he's really going to struggle to get to the 156 targets and 107 catches, wide receiver 4 in both metrics last year. I don't think we're going to get that volume this year. And as good as Lamb is, and he'll do great with whatever work he does end up seeing, I think this offense, one, is going to become significantly more run heavy. We've talked about it extensively as a boon case for Tony Pollard, that Brian Schottenheimer, their new offensive coordinator, loves to run the rock. I think that's going to be a downturn for everyone here other than Pollard. He's never, only once has he finished, Brian Schottenheimer, above the 17th in pass attempts in the NFL, and that high of his career was 13th. So it wasn't even like he boomed one year. It was great. He's the man responsible for never letting Russ cook. That whole movement about letting him get out was Brian Schottenheimer, was the murderer's row there. And I just think this offense will be significantly less explosive with Kellen Moore gone. I think everybody was stunned that you fire one of the bright young minds that's lighting up the scoreboard too much, according to Mike McCarthy. He says, I want to run the damn ball more. So one, just a run heavier offense, a smaller pie that shrinks a little bit. And then you add the fact that Brandon Cooks, who I do not think is cooked at all. I think he has plenty more years left. He's still, believe, 28, 29, got plenty of juice in those legs. I think he quit on his team last year, but should be much more motivated here in a contending team with Dallas. Michael Gallup's reportedly healthy and springy again. So a smaller pie, more mouths to feed. I think Lamb will be more than fine, but I'm not passing Garrett Wilson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, which is often the guys that you have to choose between, CeeDee Lamb or them, even Devontae Adams. So I have CeeDee Lamb, a fringe first rounder right now. I have him at 18 overall, which means I really have not landed much of him. Maybe that kills me this year because he is such a damn good player, and him and Dak do have that rapport. But I just think the volume will not be there to sustain the numbers we got last year. So Lamb could be just as good as a player, but ultimately a drop into 110, 120 targets potentially. That would be a steep downturn in his production if that was. I have him projected for 130 targets too, which is pretty good. It's still a healthy amount, but with 130, that does ultimately bump him below some of those other late first, early second wide receivers, making him a quote unquote bust. I just don't think he's going to pay off that price tag as well as some of those other guys.
Yeah, I would say I have to disagree a little bit. I mean, at the end of the day, we're arguing about like 5 to 6 slots in drafts, so it's really not that big of a difference. And in my opinion, I have St. Brown, Wilson, and Lamb all kind of clumped together. one day I might be higher on one, and the next day higher on the other. They all kind of float around for me. But I really, if you're drafting at the back of the first round, I really don't think you can go wrong grabbing, like with those bookend picks, grabbing one or even two of those guys. They're all in the same range for me, and I think I'm pretty on par with where Lamb is getting drafted by everyone else. I have him in the same range, but I mean, like I said, we're kind of debating like 4, 5, 6 slots here. So if you're missing out on Lamb and you're still getting one of those other guys like St. Brown and Wilson, I think you're just fine.
I think we're just essentially arguing because there's that tier of receivers, and they are all, like, again, they're all great. You're not ever going to say Devontae Adams is bad.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of someone's going to be more right than others. So the bottom of that tier for me is Lamb. The bottom of that tier for you is Adams. We'll see how that plays out this year.
Yep.
They're both going to be good. Again, that's why we had that preface at the beginning. Like, we're not saying those guys aren't going to have good seasons, but one's going to be better than the other. Who's it going to be? We'll find out. I think there's good cases for both sides there.
I'm going to tell you right now, you guys, I don't disagree with much that either one of you is saying. You guys are talking about this tier of wide receivers. You're mentioning the same names. You're mentioning Lamb. You're mentioning Adams. You're mentioning Amon-Ra. You're mentioning Garrett Wilson. Call me crazy. I put Jalen Waddle in that tier as well. And I feel like I would prefer him to at least a couple of those guys.
Oof, I think you're a little crazy there, Truth. I think those guys that we're talking about are clear ones on their team, whereas Waddle moves us to that, like Devonta Smith, T. Higgins, the really great number twos and really good offenses, and Waddle's at the top of that tier for me. But to me, I have an alpha number one, like those guys, and that's where Lamb kind of shifts down for me because I don't know that he's going to command quite the targets of the other guys ahead of him. But Waddle, to me, you move to that explosive number twos and great offenses. I just see that as a separate tier myself. And I love Waddle. I'm not getting against him. But.
I mean, I feel like Waddle was the wide receiver 7 last year, maybe.
He was phenomenal. Yeah.
And that's with the, Tua being taken out on a stretcher multiple times. So I don't know. I feel like he belongs. I hear the distinction you're making. And I know we're talking about bust, and clearly none of us think Waddle is a bust. But I personally would put him maybe near the bottom, but I would put him in that same tier, even though I do see the distinction you're making between a wide receiver 2 on a team and a 1. I just think he's that good, and that offense is that potentially spectacular.
What's crazy about Waddle too, Truth, is like he saw 30, 40 less targets than all those guys we were talking about, and that's why I like the other guys better. I just think their volume share. But even on 116 targets, that's all he got. Like you said, he was an absolute monster, the wide receiver 7. On nobody did more. He was like the number 2 in terms of exceeding expectations on the volume he got. He was expected to be about a top 25 wide receiver, and he ended up finishing as the wide receiver 7. So somehow, if he maintains that efficiency, but then gets a bump to 140 targets like some of these other guys, I could see him breaking in. But to me, that would take a Tyreek Hill injury probably for him to fully get to that 140 to 150 target range. But yeah, I mean, nobody was more efficient than him last year on the work he got. It was such a great scheme. So I get what you're saying. Absolutely.
We disagree on occasion, and luckily this is on video, and we're going to be able to run it back here in 2 or 3 months and see which one.
Oh yeah, we will. We're definitely gonna have to run these. And I was telling Mike before, like, nobody will ever come and be like, wow, you really nailed that pick. Thanks so much, man. Every now and again you get that. We have some really good fans that do, and that's why I love the RSJ fans. But you will so much more often get the look at this stupid idiot. Ha ha ha. We got a ton of that. We saw, I mean, remember, Truth, you probably know the guy I'm getting at, the guy we called the bust and we're getting raked over the coals for, but we didn't end up being wrong, actually. Do you remember who that was?
What season are we talking about?
Last year. We were getting murdered after the first 2 weeks. Like, this
was it Lamar Jackson?
It was Lamar Jackson. Yes, exactly.
He was giving it to us for a couple weeks there, and people were coming out of the woodwork just calling us morons, and we ended up being totally vindicated. Do you remember? Exactly. I mean, this shows how long we've been doing this together now. But my famous, I think Tyreek Hill's better than OBJ pick. There were people like just openly on YouTube and Twitter just being like, "You are an absolute dumbass," just ripping me to shreds, and I was completely vindicated. I don't remember any of the apology tweets or comments coming afterwards, right?
Those will never follow up. Nobody
No,
ever.
This business we're in.
No, that's the business of a thankless business here, but
And we love it.
That's what makes it fun. Absolutely. Yeah. Oh man. Well, let's rally off a couple more busts so people can tell us how dumb we are.
All right, this is the guy I have been most excited to talk about.
I can't wait.
This guy. All right, so first off, he is one of the victims of preseason hype. His ADP has been steadily climbing since he got on the field just a couple of weeks ago for his first snaps of the preseason. He's all the way up to 50th overall in the wide receiver 20. I cannot wrap my head around this in the slightest. First,
for the people listening to the podcast, we're talking DJ Moore here, just to make sure.
Yeah, DJ Moore. Yep. So the main two reasons I am just so far out on DJ Moore are first, the offensive situation as a whole, but more specifically, the volume that I expect him to see within this offense. So let's just talk about this Bears offense. Last season, Justin Fields, a shade under 22 attempts per game. Obviously, with the Bears trusting him more and some changes to the offense's philosophy with the addition of Moore, this number is going to increase. With a 15% increase, which I personally think is a little generous even, that translates to, on a 17-game pace, to 415 attempts for the entire year for Justin Fields. In his time in Carolina, Moore maintained a pretty good target share of somewhere in the range of 25%. I think he maxed out around 28%, but let's say a little conservative and say he has a 25% target share. That works out to 104 targets on the entire season, which is really not that many in the grand scheme of things. In the last two seasons, just two players have finished as a wide receiver 2 or better while getting fewer than 110 targets. That was last season, Cooper Kupp. I don't really need to explain that. Left with early would have smashed if he had stayed healthy. Jerry Jeudy last season, who did this on the back of 7 touchdowns. And then in 2021, Tyler Lockett, who did it on the back of 8 touchdowns. Last season, Justin Fields threw for 17 touchdowns, I want to say. And DJ Moore has never had more than 7 career touchdowns. I don't think Fields finishes with much more than 25 touchdowns if he even gets there. And so I don't think he's going to be able to do it on the back of high touchdown numbers. He's going as the wide receiver 20. I don't really think he's going to really even approach that wide receiver 24 threshold. I think he finishes somewhere closer to the 30s. And then just like with this offense as a whole, last season, bottom 10 in both yards and points per game. It's just not great. And a lot of this is driven by, first, the bad receiving core, just not a great group of skill position last year. But also it's a terrible offensive line. They led the league in sack rate. Justin Fields was sacked on 15% of his dropbacks and scrambled on 10% more. That's 1 in 4 dropbacks. He's not even attempting a pass. What can't DJ Moore do if Justin Fields is not attempting a pass? Catch the ball and rack up fantasy points. Like, everything that's going on with this offense, I just don't see the path for him to pay off this wide receiver 2 price. Nobody's doing it with this volume, unless they're getting high touchdown numbers. Moore's never had more than 7 in a season. And people want to draw these comparisons to Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown last year. Let me just keep it short and simple. It's just not the same thing, not even close. First, I think Jalen Hurts is an all-around more talented quarterback. A.J. Brown and DJ Moore are not the same player. Please do not make that comparison. A.J. Brown is, in my opinion, a much more talented receiver. They play the game differently. And Jalen Hurts benefited from the best offensive line in the league. Justin Fields has to deal with one of the worst. You got Dallas Goedert versus Cole Kmet, not the same story. Darnell Mooney versus Devonta Smith as the second option. I mean, just like the parallels that these people are trying to make or trying to draw to make this, paint the picture that we're going to see this Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown breakout. The parallels aren't there, and I think they're grabbing at straws and preseason hype videos, and I think everyone who drafts him is going to end up regretting it significantly.
He's the Wolves' 4th round Roto Street Journal mock draft pick.
And I laughed at him when it happened.
Oh, baby. Let me tell you why you're wrong. But no, I think they're all great, valid points.
Yeah, pretty good point.
I think they're all very, very solid points. I was remembering last preseason early, I was making the exact same case against A.J. Brown. Well, Jalen Hurts isn't that talented. They're going to be so run heavy. And ultimately, it's just there's not going to be enough aerial pie for him to break out. And then you just read the reports every day. And I agree with you, too. A.J. Brown is a different level than DJ Moore. I will not disagree at all about that. But you read the reports every single day. Peppered. It's A.J. Brown from Jalen Hurts again. It's all over the field. That's exactly what we're seeing every single day come out. It's not just – if I would agree with you too if it was just like, oh, yeah, 2 big play catches. Everyone's overreacting to the fact that he has 2 catches in 106 yards and a touchdown, which one is it's kind of nice. I do like that. But 2, it's every single day you read the tweets. DJ Moore in the red zone, 3 touchdowns, only guy that Justin Fields looked at. DJ Moore in the 2-minute drill racked up 5 catches, churning down the field. He is becoming the offensive, certainly the pass game, and maybe the offensive centerpiece to pair up with Justin Fields. That best friend narrative, I buy it. They hang out off the field. You want to feed your boy, and he's going to get fed. So I agree to some extent that A.J. Brown and DJ Moore, different level of receiver. The usage, I don't think, is going to be that far off. We had 3,700 yards for Jalen Hurts last year. I'm projecting right now Justin Fields to take a pretty big step because of these receiver upgrades to get to about 3,500. So, yes, not Jalen Hurts, but not overly far back. We only had 22 touchdowns last year from Jalen Hurts. I could see Justin Fields absolutely getting to 22 touchdowns, and we don't have a Devonta Smith here for that. That's where I think we can balance it out. Yes, A.J. Brown's so much better. Darnell Mooney versus Devonta Smith. I mean, come on. That's not even a question mark. So there is truly no one else. You brought up Dallas Goedert and Cole Kmet. Yes, Dallas Goedert is 10,000 times better than Cole Kmet. He is the only show in town in this passing game. And the offensive line, sure, it is a concern, but they invested that first-round pick. They invested a ton of money into it. And in the preseason, I love what I've seen from them. They protected him a little bit better, certainly, but also the way they're getting out into space. This is, yes, not the best offensive line, but they are actually very athletic, and they're drafting the screen game. You saw it with Khalil Herbert. You saw it then with DJ Moore's touchdown. They get into space really well, and they were laying people out. I really liked what I saw. It's one play, but I think this offensive line could definitely take a significant step forward. Never, of course, close to the Eagles' level of line, but I just think as the only show in town, even in a small aerial pie, I'm projecting him to command 28% of the targets, which equates right around 120, 130, which is just a little bit less than A.J. Brown did. So, yes, I don't think he's going to have an A.J. Brown season, but a high-end wide receiver, too, in round 4. I'm buying the best friend narrative. I'm buying him as the only show in town. And I really do think, yes, he's not A.J. Brown, but I think DJ Moore has just been waiting for the right opportunity to showcase that he's a true alpha. Whenever he has been used, he's only impressed. I am so excited to see what he does. And if it costs me a late 4th, which is where I got him in our league, I'm all for it. I absolutely love it. When he's creeping in early 4th, 3rd, 4th turn, that's when, yes, I can get your skepticism. I don't know if I can buy into a passing game weapon of this nature, but late 4th, mid 4th even, I'm all aboard. I love DJ Moore, the player. I think him and Fields have a special bond, and we're going to really see it play out this season.
Well, Mike, I know you're new here, but we do, and I feel like I'm just kind of echoing what I said the last player we went over. We do have this on video, and we do like to hold things over each other's heads.
Oh, yeah.
I think this is going to be a one we're revisiting.
Oh, yeah.
I'm very excited.
We will. We're going to be talking DJ Moore. We're going to be talking Jalen Waddle. We're going to be talking about Devonta Adams, a lot of these guys. And we've actually got somebody in the comments that just said DJ will not bust. So we'll see.
Hey, that's whoever's in the comments with me. Cheers to you. You know your stuff clearly.
Don't worry. I got it all written down. I'll be back here to tell you guys off in a couple months. Don't worry.
We're going to see you a lot sooner than that.
Yes, indeed.
All right. Final wide receiver busts. We had Amari Cooper, who was dethroned from the top bust when CeeDee Lamb made his way into the conversation, and also Michael Pittman. I'm just going to call these guys Jackson's guys because he's got both of them. So rattle it off, Wolf.
Yeah, I had to. After I saw Mike's picks, I was like, I guess I'm not being bold enough. So Cooper was my bolder take, and then I saw all the guys Mike was listed. So I figured I had to give who do I think is the worst type of first round pick right now to match up with the fire. So I appreciate you pushing me in that sense. But yeah, I think Cooper going right around the same price as DJ Moore. I'll take DJ Moore all day, twice on Sundays over Amari Cooper, who just had a great season in terms of the final counting stats. But there was nobody more boom or bust than him. Just as when he was actually good last season was with Jacoby Brissett. For whatever reason, 45% of his games with Jacoby Brissett were a wide receiver 1 week. Just one of his weeks with Deshaun Watson was a wide receiver 1 week. So all the blow-ups were happening with Jacoby Brissett. And all the floors were happening with Jacoby Brissett too. 4.7, 25, 23, 1.9, 20, 10.4. And then you get to when he's actually playing with his quote-unquote franchise quarterback, 8, 6.2, 9.8, 13.2, 25.5. Were you actually using him after 4 straight busts? No way. And then maybe you trusted him for your championship after that big blow up, and he goes for 7.1. So I did not like anything with this rapport. If you're expecting that Cooper is going to somehow maintain those numbers that were big with Brissett, then you're expecting Watson to take a big step forward. As my quarterback bust, clearly I'm not projecting that. And even if Watson does somehow get it better, Cooper was the only show in town last year. I love Elijah Moore. I think he'll be reborn in this offense and ideally be used the right way. Cedric Tillman's looked really good. DPJ still taking the top off the defense. This is a low-volume attack with now significantly more weapons. Never mind David Njoku's looking significantly better in year 4, whatever year he's in. He's looked apparently taking another step forward there. So a lot of mouths to feed for a boom-bust player already. I don't see him steadying out at all, and that's just not the type of receiver. In best ball, I can see it. But in season long, it's such a pain in the ass when you put these guys in and they keep fucking you, and then you go to take them out, and that's when they have their 25-point blow up. And I know we were fans of the Gabe Davises and the Mike Williams, but they also go 3-4 rounds later than Amari Cooper. So I don't want this profiler receiver. I think DJ Moore does profile as a guy that's just going to see significantly steadier volume at this same price range. So I think that's a guy you can rely on significantly more often, even in a lower volume pass attack. I want nothing to do with Amari Cooper in that range. And just to toss out Pittman real quick, I know he's one of the most common bust picks, but I had to put him in there too because I believe he's going to be a bust. 35 rookie QBs. If you haven't heard this stat from Hayden Winks, I got to just toss this one out there. Since 2010, 35 rookie QBs have attempted 300-plus pass attempts. Their top wide receiver has averaged in fantasy as the wide receiver 37. If you then cut that down to just the 8 mobile rookie QBs, that number 1 receiver finish falls all the way to wide receiver 46. And I don't think there's anybody that's more reliant on their legs and compared to their arm than Richardson. We just saw it, only 55% of his passes in college were completed. He just went 6 for 17, almost a 33% completion rate the last time. I love Richardson. I still think he can get it done with his legs for himself fantasy-wise, but I do not want to trust any of these weapons other than maybe Alec Pierce. You can rope those bombs to him, and you get some booms there late. The price for him is $150 to undrafted. Michael Pittman's going right around 75 or so, around Mike Evans, around sometimes even Chris Godwin. To me, it just makes no sense given those stats with rookie QBs, with mobile rookie QBs, and now maybe the most mobile dependent rookie QB thrown to Michael Pittman. There's no way he's going to pay off the value that he's going at right
now. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, just about that. When it comes to Amari Cooper, I tend not to agree as much. Just we talked about there, in my opinion, there's some better fantasy options than Watson. But when it comes to real football, I have a hard time seeing Watson going from one of the better quarterbacks in the league that we saw before he took his time off to being an absolute zero like we saw in his 6 starts last year. I mean, there's no sugarcoating it. He was terrible last year. But before that, I mean, he was one of the league's best. So I just don't see him being that zero once again. And everything that they've done.
What makes you think he's going to rebound, though? I mean, based on what we've seen in training camp, what all the camp reports suggest, he's nothing special. Could he just be a mental midget that collapsed on himself and just not be good anymore? I could definitely see that.
Yeah, absolutely, that could be the case.
I think it's certainly possible. I don't think he rebounds to what he was, but it's not hard. It will not be hard at all to be better than he was last year. If he doesn't, he should be cut if he played. They're giving him $200 million guaranteed. That will be the worst signing in the history of the NFL if he plays where he played last year.
I think it's going to go down as the single worst signing. I do agree with you. There's really nowhere to go but up. I just don't know that he's going to go up that much higher. Certainly not enough to sustain multiple mouths. Maybe Cooper's the one mouth that gets fed, but I don't buy it. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely the Cleveland passing game is definitely something invest with caution. I think that's a good way to put it. But everything that this offense is doing is signaling that they want to be better and throw the ball more, both be better at throwing the ball and do it more. I mean, they extend Njoku, they bring in Elijah Moore, they've got Cooper there, they've got DPJ there, someone we talked about. But Yeah, like I said, it just really goes back to I just don't see how it's worse than last season. So, but like I agree, he's not one of my favorite options for fantasy, but I mean, it's just hard just like going back and looking about how he performed in the past. Like he probably won't get back to that level, but the step up will. Have a hard time seeing him not take a step forward.
Who do you take out of Cooper versus DJ Moore? Are you definitely Cooper there?
Amari Cooper?
Yeah.
Yeah. I smirked to myself
Oh.
when you said that you were taking Moore over Cooper.
In our draft, Cooper literally went to pick before Moore. The Wolf.
They're going right around each other. Yeah.
Got Moore, and I guess he was happy about it.
We'll definitely. This will be the clip here. We'll come back and say Moore versus Cooper. We now have the debate there. We should get like we've always talked about that truth, having like a board of bets where we just we've done a couple in the past, but we never actually truly track it. We got to do that.
We've had some disagreements just in the last like 5-10 minutes that like
we've had a lot of disagreements in the last 5 to 10 minutes. We definitely got to start getting a board going. After the show, we'll try to organize that and get something going.
I'll never forgive Amari Cooper. And again, I'm dating myself here because we've been doing this for so long. I got really high on Amari Cooper when he was with the Raiders briefly, and the Wolf basically bet me that Mike Evans would outperform Amari Cooper for the rest of the year, and I was like, "You're on." And basically, as soon as I made that bet, Cooper didn't do anything else for the entire rest of the year.
And Evans smashed. I remember
Evans, I feel like he caught I feel like he had like 3 touchdowns like an hour after we had that.
Exactly. That week he just shoved it right in your face.
So I've never cared for Cooper after that. I became a Michael Crabtree guy on the Raiders.
Oh boy.
Same player, different round.
He just never, but that goes to show Cooper really had, even with the Cowboys, like in his best setup in Kellen Moore's aerial bonanza, he still was a pretty boom or bust player. And in a run heavier, ugly pie, assuming Watson's as bad as I expect him to be, I don't know. I just haven't really been a Cooper guy across his career, and I think this is one of his worst setups yet.
All right, let's move on and finish things off at the tight end position. We got one guy I'm intrigued to hear the slant on, and one guy I don't even need to hear the pitch because I've memorized it. I invented it.
We've already been through this, so it'll be rehashing old wounds here. Why don't I get that out of the way fast, because I can't wait to hear Mike's take. You guys have already heard me talk about how I think Kyle Pitts is the most overpriced player in all of fantasy. Barely can get on the field. This freak, this Calvin Johnson of tight ends, can't even get a 50% snap share from his coach. If he's that good, yes, I get Arthur Smith. It is, you got to assume rational coaching, and he just isn't. But is Pitts that good if he can't command that out of his coach? I'm not sure. 4th in air yards, sure. 1st in unrealized air yards, yeah. Is Desmond Ridder the guy that's going to suddenly rope it all over the place accurately? I don't think so. He was the tight end 22 last year, yet is going as a top 8 guy in similar price ranges to George Kittle and to Darren Waller. At this point, those two have started to separate a little bit from Pitts, which thank God they have, because there was a lot of drafts earlier this offseason that Pitts was going ahead of them, and it just absolutely blew my mind. He had all of 2 top 12 games last season at tight end, and it is not hard to have a top 12 game at tight end. You had to average around 8 points to finish in the top 12 any given week. He was averaging around 3 points most weeks. It was hideous. It was atrocious. The usage wasn't there. The play from him wasn't there. And I don't necessarily see why that would flip this year, because Desmond Ridder, that's going to be our savior. Drake London have a great rapport. I think London will do just fine with Ridder. Bijan Robinson's now here. You've got to imagine that's going to command 300-ish touches. Tyler Algier himself was very solid last year. I don't think he'll just disappear. So to me, I think you made this point last time, Mike, where there's 3 guys right now going in the top 70 picks from the Falcons offense. Someone's going to have to bust. And to me, Pitts is far and away the clearest example of who's going to bust here. I will not touch him with a 10-foot pole. Maybe next year if they get like the number 1 quarterback because they suck and Caleb Williams is there. When they finally have a quarterback I can buy into, maybe I would even waver to Kyle Pitts, but I do not want to touch this guy at all.
If you give me a list of 3 guys and one of them's Kyle Pitts and you say one of these guys is going to bust, I don't even need to see who the other 2 guys are. I already know who it is. Like showing me your cards if we're playing poker. Anyway.
I made the argument for Pitts last week. Like you can't really argue like back about the bust take. Like, it's just my philosophy. It's just like I mentioned it the last show. I just like to swing for the fences, and he's the last fence swing guy at the tight end position, in my opinion. So, but yeah,
swinging at Pitts for the fences is like when they throw the ball outside to intentionally walk you, and you just hack and miss, and the bat goes flying into the fucking crowd. Like, that is, I get swinging for the fences. I am an upside chaser through and through. I fully embrace your philosophy, Mike. But why not take a round earlier on Waller, a round earlier? Well, let's go to your bust. To swing for the fences, George Kittle. Why not swing for him? Why swing for Kyle Pitts? Let's hear this.
So, George Kittle, in my opinion, is the most scary tight end off the boards. Going at the 49th overall pick, tight end 4 off the boards. I think anyone who follows fantasy football closely could kind of see what the argument here is. I mean, it's just what the offensive situation in San Francisco. You're dealing with not only Kittle, but then you've got Brandon Ayuk, who a lot of people think will take a step forward this year. I mean, he spent a lot of the year last year in the Kyle Shanahan doghouse, wasn't seeing the field as much as he should have been, not getting used as much. So with him potentially taking a step forward, and then Debo and CMC both established as some of the most dynamic players in the NFL, it's just how much work can he get? And last year, he saw across the full season a 19.8% target share, so nearly 20%. We'll just call it 20 to round it off. But when all 4 of those guys were on the field, that took a pretty significant hit, all the way down to 13.7% target share. So that's just in and of itself kind of scary. I mean, if he's only getting 13.7% target share, I don't really see how he's going to have a lot of big plays, and we all know that he's capable of pulling off those big plays. But if he's going to be seeing that reduced role within this offense, it's kind of scary to me. And then the other point with Kittle is that I think his season is kind of, or his price and both of his performance last year and his price are being kind of propped up by this surge that he had at the end of the year last year. Early on in the year, tight end 7 in points per game through week 10. And I don't have the numbers in front of me, but the tight end 3 that he finished as last year versus the tight end 7, it's a pretty big drop off considering that there's only a handful of good, like really difference making tight ends each year in fantasy football. But towards the end of the season, in weeks 11 through 18, a lot of those with Brock Purdy, 15.9 fantasy points per game, tight end 2. But a lot of this came from the fact that he had 9 touchdowns in 8 games. And before this, he had never had more than 6 touchdowns in an entire season, let alone an 8-game span. So over a touchdown a game nobody's going to disagree with me saying he's not going for 17 plus touchdowns this year. It's just not happening. He's not doing a touchdown a game. But I think that these touchdowns led to huge performances down the stretch, and we know that the fantasy community can be a victim of recency bias, and I really think that's what's happening here. I don't think people are seeing the whole picture of other weapons within this offense and potentially Ayuk developing a bigger role and just taking away from Kittle's workload as a whole, and then that TD streak to close out the season and have a respectable fantasy performance. I just think that that's all blending together for me to be absolutely terrified of taking Kittle at his price.
The one thing that we got to address is, why did he blow up at the end of the year? Brock Purdy took over. They had just this special bond. Kittle said it the first preseason, like the first game after, and this actually was after a game that it was his one bust with Purdy when they smashed the Tom Brady led Bucks and back in California. And Kittle, even after the game, after not having a huge game, just was raving. This is my guy. Purdy has done it from day one. He's been lighting up our defense. Our number one defense is our practice squad QB, and nobody should be surprised at how this goes. And after that point on, it just was that very special bond, and especially in the red zone. Purdy just had eyes for him, and I don't know. Yes, I know he won't score the 24 touchdowns that he was on pace for, but I think 9 to 15 or so are very, very well within his range. And as the pick 65, tight end 5'6", for a guy that hasn't finished outside the top 3 tight ends for 5 straight seasons and now has the quarterback that's used him the best, I agree. Why hadn't he scored more touchdowns? I think we talked about this last time. For whatever reason, this anomaly feels like more believable to me that Kittle should be scoring a lot of touchdowns as a 6'5" athletic monster that has a big catch radius, that can just blow people off the ball and then zip out in a route. You think he's blocking and suddenly he's open. I don't understand why he didn't have more touchdowns, but the fact that him and Purdy had that rapport, I totally get that stat about when all 4 of them were on the field, he only had a 13% target share. That does make me nervous. I would wonder, I hadn't seen that stat, and I would wonder, was Purdy the quarterback then? Because I'm trying to think, that might have been in the early Jimmy Garoppolo, right after CMC got traded there. I can't remember who was the quarterback for those. That would be my big question here. Because if it was Purdy, that would give me a little pause. But even still, at the same you're drafting the guy right around Kyle Pitts. One guy has done it routinely, year in and year out, top 3 tight end with a similar ceiling. If Pitts, everything hits for him. But there's also a way scarier floor with Kyle Pitts, which we just saw and endured last year. So to me, if they're going around the same range, it's a no-brainer. The only reason against Kittle to me is if you'd rather go Waller because you feel like he's going to actually be a bona fide wide receiver 1. I could buy that because they do go at similar prices. I don't know. I don't see it at all. I think Kittle is a phenomenal pick, and him and Purdy are just going to pick up similarly to where they left off. I'm all in.
2 things. First of all, yeah, if you get any of Kyle Pitts, you are going to get to know the floor real well. Like you're going to know every nook and cranny and dust bunny and cracking else that's on that floor. You're going to know it's going to be your best friend. Second thing is that I feel like this is an important distinction that we should clear up. And if I misheard one or both of you, please correct me. But I feel like you may be arguing from a different draft point, because I heard MOH say Kittle's going around like pick 49, first pick in the 5th round, which is in fact the exact pick that he went in the RSJ mock draft. And I just heard the Wolf, I feel like, say pick 65. Well, that's a significant difference if you guys are arguing those points. I mean, because, you know, maybe at pick 49, you wouldn't love him as much, Wolf. So where are you guys? Am I wrong about quoting you guys on those picks?
I've got it pulled up right here in front of me. ESPN, full PPR, 45th overall, sleeper, 44th.
Okay. So Wolf, you said 65, and I think MOH might agree that he might be a great steal at 65.
Yeah, I would, but yeah, that's almost 2 rounds later. So
right,
yeah,
that's the. I'm going off the best ball, which we know is definitely not representative of home leagues. In Yahoo, though, I think he was going around 55 to 60. I don't have that ADP right in front of me. I think on the Fantasy Pros ADP, he was around 50 to 55 range. Even then, though, I mean, we're talking about that range where receivers are still going to be about the same around later. To me, the argument against Kittle would really be he's around the same price as Waller. And honestly, I bumped Waller ahead of Kittle. I get that. I think Waller does have the more pass to being the clear-cut guy, whereas Kittle is going to always have to contend with these other mouths. But even in contending with them, I just buy him and Brock Purdy's rapport. I do not think that was fake. I think the fact that it happened not just 1 week, it wasn't just a 3-touchdown bonanza. It was week in and week out. And even in the playoffs, when the other guys got back, they still were connecting quite often in that Cowboys game. I think this connection is real. And the only argument against him would, I love getting a tight end in that pick 50 range. If you didn't want to go Kittle and you wanted to go Waller instead, fine. But just don't go fucking Kyle Pitts. That's all. I'm imploring you to not go Kyle Pitts.
Yeah, just about every format, Kittle and Waller are going within 5-6 picks of each other. I'm taking Waller every single day there.
Yeah.
It's a no-brainer.
And me too. Honestly, I'll agree with you there. I'll give you that. I'm just saying if Waller's gone, I still think Kittle is a phenomenal pick in that 4th to mid-5th range. I love getting tight end there. I think that's a huge drop-off. Once Waller's gone, there's like Goddard, who's like a nice tight end, but he doesn't have that I can be the number 2 tight end in fantasy this year. I think Waller and Kittle both have ceiling narratives where they could hit that. And once those 2 guys are gone, I'm just punting the position. I don't even want to think about it anymore. So I really just like targeting tight end there, whichever one it ends up being. I think that's a really, really good spot to look for your guy.
All right, fellas, I got to get going. It's been a blast. I really enjoyed this one. I haven't got a few opinions in of my own, which I don't always get to do because you guys know your stuff so well. But I can't wait to see how some of these things shake out. And
this will be a real fun one to revisit. Yep. I absolutely agree. BUSTS is always, it gets heated. It's you bring like this negative energy because you're like, this guy's gonna suck, and it's fun. It's
I love it. I was looking forward to this all day.
Like, I want to be. My instinct is to get really mad at MOH when he's saying things about Pitts that are not like angry, but I'm having a hard time getting too pissed at him. His delivery is very calm. We could learn a few things from him.
I try.
Yeah. All right, guys. I'll see you later.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Truth. It was awesome having the show with you. And yeah, I'd say let's hit the mailbag at this point. Do you want to stick around with me, Mike, to mow through this?
Let's do it.
I do have to go. I'm just going to say I have 10 minutes till my college draft starts. I have pick 8, so I'd even have a little time, but I do kind of just want to get myself set up. So
that's fair.
I'm going to kind of give you guys the rapid fire. I apologize in advance if I go a little fast. You can find me at Roto Street Wolf on Twitter if you want a more in-depth answer. Comment on my top post. I'm taking all the questions I can up there, or send me a DM if you don't want it out in the public. Whatever, I'll answer that too. But I prefer the interaction on the Roto Street Wolf there. And you can find my updated big board with everything we've talked about with the preseason week 3, all these busts, all that good stuff will be on the big board as well, Roto Street Journal there. But let's dive into what we got. We got about 15, 20 questions. Let's see how many we can mow through before I got to bounce off. So Wolf, for Flowers or Bateman, PPR league, thanks. For me, it's easy. It's Zay Flowers. I'm not a Bateman guy. He's had his time. He could have been the true number 1. Maybe injuries just kept getting in the way, but I don't buy Bateman, and I really love Flowers. I think he's going to be a nice young stud. What do you think, Mike?
I agree. I liked Bateman a lot early on in his career, but yeah, it's exactly what you said. It's been injuries, so I'm moving on at this point. It's Flowers easy. I don't think many people would disagree either.
Yeah, perfect. So we're on the same page. Joe, go Flowers if you have the choice between the two. Man, Chase, good to see you. Dane, much like our mock draft, it's going to be hard for me to pass up on Jacobs. Late second, even with the curse of 370 and showing up to camp late season production. I agree 100% with you. That's why I do like rookies at a later season production. It does matter. And so if Jacobs gets his legs under him and it's Josh Jacobs for the second half of the year and you had a slow first half, but you still make the playoffs, that's invaluable. I'm totally with you, Chase. It's the curse of 370 that we outlined that makes me a little bit nervous. And if we're going towards the top of round 2, it does get a little bit easier to stomach if you don't love those T. Higgins, the Devonta Smiths, the Olaves. Where it gets tough for me is if he starts going to the mid first, where you might have to pass up on a Lamb or a Devontae or something of that nature. But what about you, Mike? Would you think you can stomach Jacobs in the late second, or are you still worried about these points?
Yeah, I mean, that's getting to the range where I'm more comfortable, but I just think the reality is I don't think you'll see him in the late second. I think especially in home leagues where everyone remembers him last year as that guy who won leagues and was the rushing champ, I don't think he makes it there. So I really think he's going to be gone within the first 20 picks pretty easily. So we'll have to wait and see. Like the fantasy community is definitely still adjusting here, but I don't really think you'll see him there. So I'll be passing at what I expect his price to be.
Yeah, I'm with you there too. Even in the best ball where it's like a wide receiver heavy, often ADP, he's starting to creep up in a couple drafts I've done. And a lot of times that's over adjusting to recent news. But he's creeping up to mid-second right now. And there's not where I love him. All right, Tron, we got a trade for you. Who wins this trade, Mahomes and Walker or Fields and Chubb? I prefer the Fields and Chubb side myself there. Just Chubb to me is significantly above Kenneth Walker. Obviously, Mahomes is better than Fields. But fantasy-wise, I think the gap between Chubb and Walker is a lot bigger than Fields and Mahomes. What do you think?
I think it's definitely Fields and Chubb. I think I'm not as high on Fields as everyone else. I think you could have kind of guessed that based on what I was talking about earlier. But those two players can both compete for the QB1 in fantasy football. Nick Chubb can compete for the RB1 in fantasy football. Kenneth Walker cannot. Yeah. I think it's pretty clear cut.
I think that's a great way to put it. Tron's got another one for us. Good question, too. I have Mahomes, Pierce. Oh, so this is kind of explaining his roster. It's still the other side. It's Fields and Chubb for me. Especially because it looks like that team could use a true RB1 as well, Tron. So all the more reason to pump that one up. Mike Q, coming in late. What's up, guys? I found you guys a month ago. Hey, thank you. Thank you for being a good fan and coming back in, my man. Great to see you. Always good to get the new fans welcome. We do shows all season too, Mike. We'll go over our regular season schedule in the next week or so. But I go live much to the chagrin of my wife. I go live 5 times a week in the season. So you can come on. We have some fans that come to every single one, and I hope you're one of them, Mike. We're glad to have you aboard. I'm glad you're hopping on the Danny Jones train too. Danny Dumb Donnie Dumb work draft. That is, the work draft is always classic.
Yeah.
Super flex is an interesting wrinkle. I don't mind having like one super flex league, but I agree. I don't love it. I'm just so used to one QB leagues. But it is a fun wrinkle to have at least one of them. Had third pick, you got to go early QB. Allen, AJ Brown. I think that's a phenomenal start. Still great team. I mean, Mike, I think you did a really nice job on that team. I mean, the depth that I don't know. I don't see any holes in that team. I think every player you took is a guy I really like. The fact that you got Love that late too is like a QB3 in case Jones. As much as I love Jones, I don't want to pretend like he's the sure thing and a guaranteed fantasy godsend. Like it's Daniel Jones at the end of the day. So I think Love's a really nice way to balance that out. And so he's the one that was saying DJ will not bust. I'm with you. He might be a little biased, but
I've got the bias too. I got my OSU on, but I mean, I still have my concerns.
Yes, and they're fair concerns. I think it was a fair argument to bring up, but I'm just buying that even in a lower volume attack that there's just no one else that's going to command volume. I think he's going to just be the entire show. Is there a ranking on the website for? So I don't do defenses and kickers. I guess I could, but honestly, it just feels like a waste of time. It's a crapshoot to me. I'll say this, Mike. One of my favorite picks at kicker is Graham Gano, just because I do like this Giants offense to take another step. And Gano's money. He was booting 50-yarders all day last year. So I always try to get any kicker that could boot it from 50. And then who do I think might be across the 50 more often? To me, that's the Giants. So I've been loving him, and I love the Ravens as a defense because they're facing Houston in week 1. I think they'll swallow them up at home. The Saints also have a really nice early season schedule for a pretty good defense too. Do you have any kickers or defense you just love, Mike? Or
the first thing I'll say is get your league to get rid of kickers and defenses. If you have to draft a kicker and defense, wait for your last 2 picks. But if you can, just don't draft them and pick one up on that Wednesday night before the season kicks off. But the only team I was going to mention was the Saints. Really weak schedule early on. So that'd be my pick if I had to. But
I mean, imagine so you could take Kyron Williams with a last round pick. I'm not ever wishing anything happens, but we've seen Akers get hurt in practice before. What if he goes down and suffers a season ender and you could have picked Kyron Williams up for free and now he's going in round 6 in drafts, round 5. Mm-hmm. It's absolutely, if you don't have to draft defense and kicker, I'm fully with you. I would not draft a defense and kicker as well. Pitt's way too volatile, so Mike's with me a little bit there. Would rather wait and get someone later. Heard Truth has a Pitts jersey. Yeah, he does. He wears it to sleep. He pretends like he hates him, and then he cuddles with his Pitts jersey on. Good to see you, Matt. What's going on, man? Any advice for a dynasty draft? Got 1 in an hour. I mean, that's such a vague question that unfortunately in a time crunch, I don't have much that I can give you. I would just say you got to keep your eyes to the future while still trying to win. I know that seems obvious, but one of my biggest regrets is 2 years ago, we did our share, maybe 3 years ago, and I took Tyreek Hill, thought he was the wide receiver 1 for Pat Mahomes for the next 8 years. And I took him over Justin Jefferson. And I knew I liked Jefferson better as a player, but I just couldn't pass up that situation. And now he's not in that situation anymore. And he's in a good one. He's fine. But then now he's always side if you can. If you're very similar in debate, side with the youth and side with the talent is what I would go for, because situations can always improve. And you're trying to play that long game there. Do you have any should you play a lot of Dynasty, Mike, or not really?
It's not really my thing, but I mean, this question's a little vague to you. You don't really know the league format. Like, it could be super flex, it could be regular. Who really knows? So I think what you said was fine.
Yeah, exactly. Nope, fully agree. So what's up, Jeremiah? Best of luck in your draft tonight, man. I'm sorry, we got that, and I know you're always a loyal guy for the guide. So Jeremiah, if you want me to, I can forward you the Google Doc that has all the guide stuff, since we haven't dropped the PDF yet. I know you've supported it in the past and maybe would buy it after the fact or something like that. I can, at minimum, forward you the cheat sheet. So yeah, after this, Jeremiah, I don't know if you have Twitter, but just send me a DM at RotoStreetWolf, and I can try to help you. You got pick 9. Who would you target? I'm looking at Kelsey if he falls. I have pick 8 actually coming up in my draft, especially in a 10 team. You got to get the edges where you can. And because the running back depth, the receiver depth is a little bit bigger, and there's always kind of decent guys on the waiver wire in a 10-teamer. So I think if Kelsey falls to you, Jeremiah, that's absolutely the play in my opinion. And if not, 10-team half PPR, I'd probably be trying to go running back if Eckler falls, or you're a Cowboys guy. If Pollard falls, I love Tony Pollard. He's my running back 3. Running back receiver, something of that nature. It also matters, though, is it 10-team 2 or 3 receivers? Because that does change things as well. But I'd probably be looking to either go Pollard, Chubb, or Pollard receiver if Kelsey does not fall. Anybody else you'd want to toss in there, Mike?
I would say Diggs as well.
Yeah.
I would be looking to go Diggs and then Chubb or Pollard there unless Kelsey fell. I agree.
I think Diggs is a great name to toss out there too. But you know where the big board is, Jeremiah. I got a college draft tonight, so I'll do my best to help you out, but it might be tough. I, in fact, have to sign off to log in for that draft now. But Mike, I'll rapid fire through this, and you're welcome, Joe. Great to see you. Thanks for tuning in the whole time. 6:30 comment, and you're still here at 7:50. Love to see that. Cooper Kupp or Kelsey PPR. Non-best ball. I go Cooper Kupp if it's 3 receivers. If it's 2 receivers, I think I might still go Cooper Kupp, but Kelsey becomes a lot more interesting. I'd probably go Kelsey actually in a 2 league. I think he can really make that depth. But in 3 receivers, it's Cooper Kupp for me. What about you?
Kupp easy for me.
For both, no matter how many receivers?
Yep. Easy.
Fair enough. Hey, I love them both. Mike, I don't think you can go wrong. They're phenomenal picks. And PPR too. Kupp is just a god. Alrighty, guys. Well, thank you so much. Best of luck in all your drafts. Do keep your eyes peeled. If you bought the guide last year, we're going to send an email out to just alert you guys when it is live. If you didn't, keep your eyes peeled. It will pop up on the website right in that little corner when it does go live. If you want to support your boys, get all our analysis, BUSTS, draft guide, everything, the map, it will be there for you. But until then, the rotostreetjournal.com big board is up for all your drafts as well. In a world full of fancy sheep, guys, be the wolf. Come back tomorrow night, 6:30. We'll be drafting with $1 million winner Justin Herzig. How do you win $1 million in best ball? Until next time, guys. In a world full of fancy sheep, be the wolf. Later.
See ya.